Member Thompson?
Here.
Member Garshaw?
Here.
Member English?
Here.
Chair Samaragic?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Any recommendations to changes? The agenda is approved as presented. Audience comments. Any audience comments? No audience comments. We shall proceed to the presentations.
All right. Well,
Everyone is on.
good afternoon, Finance Budget Review Committee. First off, we are going to have Raf Tellis and Sean with us to go over our reclaimed water, stormwater, wastewater utility revenue sufficiency study and wastewater connection fees. This project was something that was spearheaded out of the city manager's office, and so just wanted to say a quick thank you to Kathleen Murray for her work and efforts in getting this project off the ground, as well as Camden. He had a lot of work on that as well. So excited to have this presentation. If you guys wouldn't mind just holding questions until the end of each presentation today, I think that will help us just stay on track in case they end up answering any of the questions throughout the presentation. And with that, it looks like we have Sean online with Raf Tellis. I can turn it over to him. Sean, can you hear us?
Sorry, I forgot I was on mute.
Oh, no problem. We can hear you.
For purposes of the slideshow, should I share my screen here, or is there one that's viewable for the committee?
We can't see it here without sharing.
Yeah, if you just want to go ahead and share your screen, Sean, that would be great.
Okay. Okay. Is it visible for everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, can everyone see this okay? I can't hear anything.
Yes, we can see it. Sean, can you hear us?
I'm sorry, did the sound die on my end?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Oh, I couldn't hear that comment. Okay. I think my sound may be a little soft, so I apologize for that.
No problem. And
Okay,
we can see your screen, so we're
So
good.
I'll
on
get
our
the ball
side.
rolling here. My name is Sean Ocasio. I'm a senior manager with Raf Tellis Financial Consultants. I've been working with the city on the development of the revenue sufficiency study for the reclaimed water, stormwater, and wastewater systems, as well as a wastewater connection fee update. It's a fairly comprehensive review of the various enterprise funds, looking at revenues, expenses, capital, debt payments, and so on, as well as assets and capital plans and capacity associated issues with the connection fee analysis. In terms of the last time something like this was evaluated by the city, at least as far as I'm aware, at least on the wastewater side, it was many years ago. The last time I heard any of it was around 2015. It may be even a little before then. So it's been a little while, so we're trying to make sure we go through everything. So this is a long slideshow, so we'll get right to it. In terms of an overall agenda, the way it's structured for this afternoon is first a review of the revenue sufficiency analyses by system, And as a part of that, we're going to look over the major tasks, goals, and considerations, review major assumptions, and then discuss summary findings and recommendations. And then there'll be a set of slides on the tail end with respect to the wastewater connection fee analysis as well. So with respect to the revenue sufficiency studies, we'll start just with a little bit of primer information here. The reclaimed water, stormwater, and wastewater departments are all structured as utility enterprise funds for the city, or proprietary funds. And so for financial reporting purposes, that's important. Essentially, what I want to draw out with this slide here is, according to GASB, that enterprise funds are essentially funds that have to be run like a business, and so that the user charges and fees are what support and sustain the operations of the system. And so when it comes to these three systems in particular, reclaimed water, stormwater, and wastewater, roughly 95 to 99% of the total revenue of the utility systems come from these utility rates. And so the reason that's important to know is when it comes to what major levers do you have in order to enhance the financial picture and condition of each respective department, it's essentially mainly going to be on the revenue adjustment side. So the rates having to be adjusted in order to provide relief in order to cover the cost of operating the systems. In terms of study tasks and overall approach for the revenue sufficiency side, what we're trying to do is develop a financial forecast to project what we call the revenue requirements and revenues of the systems for reclaimed water, stormwater, and wastewater. And as a part of that, we're looking at the rate revenues, customer growth, any sorts of other types of income, interest, connection fees. On the revenue requirement side, that's a fancy way of just saying all the cash outflows of the system. So revenue requirements is comprised of operating expenses, payments on debt and loans, capital funding, and then any sort of inter-fund transfers as well. And so what we're trying to do is essentially that balancing act is what that chart is representative of there. And so we're looking at not only just the cash flow requirements of the system, but also are you going to be meeting your cash reserve targets? Are you going to be meeting any financial performance metrics that you have? And projecting the adequacy of revenues at existing rates is the main focus for each of these three departments that we've evaluated, with then the added task of, for the wastewater system, we also looked at an alternative rate structure to help better balance some of the cost differentials within the wastewater system. And we'll get to that as we move forward. In terms of major goals and considerations, some of the things we're trying to do as a part of this, we're not just trying to make sure that everything is funded, but obviously we're also trying to, to the extent possible, if we can use any existing cash reserves to try to phase in some of these rate adjustments, we're trying to do that. But we're also at the same time trying to make sure that we achieve and maintain positive cash flow for each of the three utility funds, that we also achieve and maintain a certain targeted level of reserves in order to promote financial health and liquidity for each of the systems. That target was set at 90 days of revenues for each of the three departments we're looking at. And then the other item is compliance with your loan agreements. So those are the three major things we try to balance. It's cash flow, your cash balances, and then your debt service coverage. And what your coverage is a set of financial metrics that you have to meet associated with some of your existing loans for the various departments. And those are essentially a ratio calculation. That's your revenues of the system minus your operating expenses, that net revenue number as it then relates to the debt payments of that system. And you have certain requirements based on your loan agreements that I've noted here on senior and lien debt versus your SRF debt, and just an overall target health metric. So we're trying to balance those three main objectives here while also trying to phase in increases to the extent we can. So starting with the reclaimed water system, we'll go into the major assumptions here. As far as on the system customers growth and revenue side, currently the reclaimed system and department provides service to approximately 2,900 accounts that are billed on a bi-monthly basis. There's minimal growth built into the forecast, and you'll see that echoed in the other two analyses for stormwater and for wastewater as well. In terms of the projection of the system's rate revenue at existing rates, currently that's projected at about $1.1 million for fiscal year 2026, and that's projected to be generally constant through fiscal year 2030, which was our general planning horizon. The reason is, again, very low growth, so it's essentially staying fairly stable in terms of the rate revenue side. And again, that projection of revenue is just based on the small amount of growth and your rates at their existing level. That's not accounting for any projected rate increases. The system does have some other revenues as well. Other miscellaneous revenues are projected about $16,200 a year on an annual basis. That includes connection fees, certain permitting fees, disconnect, scrap sales, and some other reimbursements. Interest income based on projected fund balances is approximately just under $14,000 per year. And then in order to balance the budget for 2026, one of the things that was budgeted as a part of the reclaim system was a transfer in from the general fund. And the revenues themselves for the reclaimed water fund could only cover the operating costs and then a portion of the loan that the reclaim system has to the general fund, but that isn't sufficient to cover any additional capital investment in the system. So currently it's being balanced by use of the general fund. Switching from the revenue and side to the revenue requirement side, in terms of operating expenses and debt service, historically, operating expenses have grown at a pretty high rate of climb, roughly about 16% per year on average since 2021. The operating expenses that are then currently assumed for our starting point, and the way we develop our starting points with your budget documents is operating expense about $1.1 million in 2026, and projected to increase to about 1.3 million, and that's by the end of the forecast period, and that's roughly a rate of climb of about 4.5% per year. The way we get there is we take your detailed line item budget, we project it, and so for any costs associated with labor, those costs were escalated about 4% per year. Health insurance type costs were escalated about 10% per year. For cost items, excuse me, that were inflation in nature, about 2.2% per year. Repair and maintenance costs about 3.2% per year, and then purchase reclaimed water rate from the county of about 5% per year. So those various factors together get us to that 4.5% on an average basis for the department. With respect to the general fund loan repayments, there's currently a loan that the reclaim system has with the general fund, and that's being paid back at a rate of $61,000 per year. The estimated payoff of that obligation to the general fund is estimated at 2039. So in addition to your operating expenses, the loan to the general fund that's being paid back, you also have the capital improvement program. In the case of the reclaim system, it's about $4.5 million between 2026 and 2031. It's comprised of two major projects, lateral service pipe replacement and pig port installation. These are anticipated to be funded entirely by user rates over time. So the average annual funding requirement is about $676. Kind of tick downward and up throughout the forecast period. But in total, it's about a $4.5 million plan that's about $676,000 per year that's to be funded as well as part of this expenditure forecast. So with that, kind of bringing those different concepts together on a high-level basis, what this chart here represents is the bars here are the cash outflows of the reclaim system. So the red being the operating expenses, the orange being that $61,000 loan to the general fund, and then the light blue at the top being your capital plan on an annual basis. And what you'll see is those bars going across for each year. And then the black dotted line on this slide is the revenues of the system at existing rates and inclusive of the very small amount of growth that's projected. So with that, what you see is that for 2026, based on the budgeted expenses and based on the loan payment, there's the rates are sufficient to cover your operating costs and that loan payment, but not enough to cover any form of reinvestment in the system in order to maintain and provide service. And then as the forecast moves forward, you'll see that that actually gets lower and lower to the point that the revenues aren't even sufficient to cover the projected operating expenses themselves. So the existing reclaimed water revenues are projected to be insufficient to cover the overall revenue requirements of the reclaim system throughout the entirety of the forecast period. The main issues that that are related to this that we talked about, there's a low growth in customers, so there's no increase in your customer base to spread some of these costs over. You have inflationary increases in your operating costs. You have projected increases in the wholesale rates coming from the county. You also have the capital plan itself, increasing and renewal and replacement type funding in order to maintain your existing assets. And then you also have the goal of trying to end this particular department's reliance on general fund transfers in order to fund and subsidize utility operations. Those are kind of the main drivers as a part of things. So with that in mind and those major assumptions on revenues and expenditures, the preliminary rate path that we've identified here, you'll see on a percentage basis is 50% increase in the reclaimed rate for 2027, followed by 8% per year increases in the rate thereafter, for a total cumulative increase over that window of time of just over 104% on a cumulative basis. When we compare that to the basic monthly service fee, currently that's at $25 is the base fee. That would be an increase to $37.50 in 2027, $40.50 in 28, $43.74 in 29, $47.24 in 30, up to $51.02 for 2031. Now, one thing I want to note is this particular rate plan is, again, based on the projected revenues, expenses, the debt payments and capital plan that we just talked about as presented, and it assumes that there be no continued reliance on funding from the general fund to make things work. And you'll notice this is also a front-end heavy plan, so the bulk of the increases in the first year. Again, that's to pick up the difference that what the general fund was funding before, and then also to fund those capital projects and other expenditure type items. So this is just an update to the chart we saw a moment ago with the addition of the revenues at the proposed rate level. And that's the addition of that green dotted line that you'll see there. So that first bump up is the 50% increase, and then the upward slope is associated with those 8% increases in the years thereafter. You'll also note that in those latter years, there's a little bit of a space between the dotted line and the bars. That's in order to try to improve the utility's cash position as well and build that up over time. And you'll see that in this next chart here. So the goal here is to try to maintain an adequate cash reserve in the fund to handle contingency events, unforeseen expenditure type items or capital issues, and to get to and maintain about a 90-day reserve of rate revenues by the last year of the forecast period. And that's what we're aiming for here, and these rates are projected to take you there. In terms of a bill comparison for that first year increase of the 2027, the 50% increase, that current bill of $25 that you'll see in the light green on the chart would increase to the $37. And you'll see some other comparables here. The average of this survey came in at $20.53 for an average reclaim bill at 10,000 gallons of usage. However, one thing I want to mention here is that the way reclaim is billed for the city is not on a usage basis. There's a base fee, and then that base fee can be expanded on depending on the size of the property. So it's not a function of usage, it's more of a function of just the square footage of the parcel. So when we're trying to compare things here, it becomes a little bit of a game of apples and oranges, but just to put things on a comparison basis, this would be how you would stack against bills at the 10,000 gallon usage level. And then this next slide would be how you compare if all those same comparables were put in terms of an average irrigation bill of 25,000 gallons, at which point now the proposed bill becomes a little bit more in line with the average, just slightly above it, and you'll see the relative positions of the other utilities have changed. When it comes to reclaim billing, one thing I wanted to mention here is, it can vary materially across the different municipalities across the state. As you'll see here, this is a little more regional. That can vary for a myriad of reasons. It can be a function of, what's their overall philosophy and how they approach reclaim billing, whether they treat it as a means of just effluent disposal, so they have it priced very affordably in order to just incentivize its usage, not necessarily trying to price it for the fact that it's an irrigation service. What level of general fund funding do these other communities have for the reclaim system, level of grant funding and so on. So I wouldn't think of the comparison as an overall report card of system operations, but more just a snapshot point in time of how the city's bill compares to other municipality bills. And there's a notable set of differences that can occur between these various comparables. As a part of the reclaimed water rate analysis, we were asked to review an alternative rate scenario to try to smooth out some of that initial significant increase. And in order to do so, essentially what it assumes is that there's a reduction in the near-term capital plan in total of about $700,000. Remember, the total plan was about $4.5 million over the forecast period, so that would reduce it by $700,000 on the front end. The idea being that it would provide some relief and allow for a phasing up of the rate over time. Now, if you'll notice, by the end, the cumulative increase gets to about the same exact place. I think we were at 104% and change. Here we're at 103% and change. It almost rounds to 104. So the idea, excuse me, is that you'll still be, by the end of the forecast period, be funding the same overall level of cost, the same operating cost, the same debt payment, but you'd be phasing into that capital plan at a slightly slower rate in order to get to that full amount by the end. So this is just another alternative if the capital plan was to be reduced on the front end by about $700,000. So I'll pause here for a moment since that's the reclaim system. I do have a Q&A side later, but if you want, we can do Q&A by each topic, just that way things don't get lost in the weeds. You let me know what your preference is, please.
Just can you have the detail?
Sean, if you just want to do the full presentation, and then we can grab the questions at the end.
Sure, I'll keep going.
Thank you.
So switching gears to stormwater. In terms of system customers, growth and revenues, the stormwater system provides service to about 76, almost 7,700 different parcels that are billed on an assessment basis. That equates to about 7,738 ERUs, which is the basis for how stormwater is billed. It has to do with the impervious area. Again, similar to the reclaim system, there's minimal growth that's projected for this system. And so the revenues at existing rates that are projected for 2026 are about $1.4 million and are projected to be relatively constant through the forecast period. Again, just because of that minimal growth. There is some interest income that's projected as well as a part of this system, just under $28,000 per year on an average annual basis. And the budget, the comment here is that the budget for 2026 is balanced through the use of some reserves. And so that's a strategy that can be taken for a while, but eventually, you will run out of reserves. So this plan is definitely trying to make sure that we use those reserves to the extent we can, but not depleting them too much. In terms of overall revenue requirements, just starting with operating expenses for the stormwater system, expenses have grown at a rate of just under 8% per year on an average basis since 2021. Operating expenses as projected in the city's 2026 budget are about $1.3 million and are projected to increase to about $1.6 million. That's roughly a rate of change of about 3.8% per year. Again, same general factors that we talked about on the reclaim side, a 4% labor factor, 10% health insurance, 2.2% for CPI, and 3.2% per year for repair and maintenance type costs. Those various budgetary line items weighted at these different cost factors gets us that 3.8% per year in the aggregate. In terms of the overall capital improvement plan for stormwater, it's this one I'm going to speak to a little differently. This one's a plan of about $140.9 million in total stormwater-related projects for the period of 2026 through 2031. However, what I want to note is that in the current plan, approximately $132.8 million of those projects is shown as being funded from the Resiliency Fund. The remaining $8.1 million is budgeted as being funded out of the Stormwater Fund itself. So of that, about $1.4 million per year are anticipated to be funded through rates and also through the use of additional borrowings. Approximately $3.4 million from rates and about $4.8 million from additional debt is assumed in the forecast period, with the difference again being from that Resiliency Fund. In terms of existing debt service, the system is currently paying on a Stormwater Revenue Note Series 2015. That's approximately $256,000 per year, and that's anticipated to be paid off in fiscal year 2030. What you'll see on the chart here is the blue bars that you see. Those are the payments out of the existing debt. Again, that's that $256,000 I mentioned, and you'll see it phase down by 2030 to then go away by 2031. That's the payoff I was talking about. And the red bars are representative of, as I mentioned before, the plan currently anticipates the use of additional borrowings in order to fund a portion of the capital improvement plan for the system, and the payments associated with those additional borrowings would then be projected to come online at about 2030 and 2031. So as one essentially is paying off, the other one would be coming online. That's what you see in the chart there. That proposed SRF loan issue would then be about $353,000 per year on an annual basis starting in fiscal year 2030. So just like what we talked about before on the reclaim side, it's the same type of chart here for stormwater. We have the revenue requirements and the revenue shown together. Operating expenses, you'll see those increasing over time. You have the existing debt payments that are going over time and then decreasing in 2030 and being eliminated by 2031. That's the payoff of the existing loan I mentioned. And then you'll see the yellow coming on, that's the new debt, a partial payment for 2030 and then a full payment in 2031. The light blue is the capital plan, the portion of the capital improvement plan that's anticipated to be funded from rates layered atop that as well. So what you can see here as it compares to that black dotted line is that the revenues at existing rates here are also projected to be insufficient to cover operating costs, debt, and capital over the forecast period. So similar position there. The major issues affecting this system, similar to the reclaim system, it's a low growth environment. There's inflationary increases on all your operating costs. There's a significant capital improvement program to improve and maintain your stormwater system. And then also as a part of that, the funding of that plan, there's an increase in annual debt service payments associated with additional borrowing to fund those projects. So those are kind of the main things hitting you is inflationary increases, a significant capital plan, and then additional borrowing associated with that capital plan. Excuse me. So then the preliminary stormwater rate adjustments identified in the financial forecast for 2027 through 2031. On a percentage basis overall, 15% for 2027, 28, and 29, followed by 6.5% in 2030 and 2031, for a total cumulative increase of about 72.5%. The subsequent lines are just how those percentages would impact the existing portions of your stormwater bill, the parcel rate versus the variable rate. And you'll see that increasing from a combined amount of $183.75, assuming one parcel with one ERU, increasing to $316.97 by 2031 there. Again, this plan is also based on that the full funding of operating expenses, debt payments, and the capital plan as initially presented. So with that rate path, what you'll see is the addition of the green dotted line here, revenues at proposed rates, and you'll see that by the end of the forecast period, the revenues are sufficient to cover the entirety of operating expenses, existing and proposed debt, and the capital improvement program. In those earlier years where it's still not sufficient, that's where we're making up the difference through some use of the debt and also existing reserves. And you'll see that illustrated here. The cash position over time, excuse me, decreasing in the first 3 years, really, to try to phase in those rate impacts. Like I mentioned before on the front end of the presentation, what we're trying to do is, to the extent that there are cash reserves available, use those to try to mitigate some of the impact to the customer. And in this case, this particular system did have cash reserves that we could do that with, and that's why this particular rate plan is smoother than what we saw for the reclaim system. So what you'll see is by the end, again, still aiming for and hitting that 90 days of rate revenue target, but still, using those reserves over time in order to smooth out that rate trajectory. In terms of rate comparison here on the stormwater side, this is all converted to an annual basis, even though some places will bill monthly, just to keep it comparable. You'll see the existing bill for one parcel with one ERU at $183.75, increasing for the 2027 increase to $211.32. The average of other comparables that we surveyed gets us to an average about $158.48 per ERU. But you'll notice there's quite a big variance there between some of these comparables. Again, just like we talked about, it can be a function of what level of cost is built into their rate. So for instance, this plan that we're talking about covers the full amount of the operating costs for the stormwater system, the full capital plan that's associated with stormwater, paying its debts, and so on, and building a reserve over time. It's very possible that some of these other communities may be having some sort of either general fund subsidy, or they just don't fund the full level of cost in order to maintain the system. We do see that quite frequently as well. Some other higher examples would be a community like City of Palm Coast, which theirs would be even higher on this comparison. We didn't put them there, but just because of the region. But overall, just a bit above average and moving upwards here. So some other considerations here. You know, as noted previously, roughly about 133 million of the capital plan was shown, associated with the stormwater system was shown as being funded from the resiliency fund. Those projects, as we understand them, are designed to provide localized benefits to certain specific areas of the city, and so we can't really include them in the base fee for service, since you bill on an assessment basis. So whereas in the prior scenario we were talking about with reclaim, we were able to run an alternative rate calculation. In this case, we can't really do that because there's special benefit rules associated with how you can bill for stormwater when it's on an assessment basis. And so to the extent that you have projects in that resilience fund that are associated with certain areas, you would have to differentiate zones and either take on an approach that maybe creates a special additional assessment by zone that could then be pledged to project-specific financing. Then that way you have a link between the property receiving a benefit from the project and what's being paid. There's some different things to look at there to consider, in addition to just what we're talking about overall revenue sufficiency. Switching to the wastewater utility system. For wastewater, the system currently provides service to approximately 3,600 wastewater accounts that are billed on a bi-monthly basis. Again, projecting minimal growth for this utility system as well. In terms of revenues at existing rates, those are projected at $8.1 million for 2026 and are projected to be generally constant through 2030 as well. Again, this is revenue at existing rates with just minimal growth. No real additional other revenues are projected, though there is interest income of about just under $92,000 per year projected, and some connection fee revenue about $6,400 per year. For the wastewater fund, the 2026 budget was balanced, not only through rates but also through the use of grants and from general fund transfers in part. So the budgeted revenues are projected to cover operating expenses, a portion of existing debt, but they're not sufficient to cover any additional investment in the system at present level. In terms of the operating expenses of the system, historically, they've been increasing as well from 2021 to 2024 at almost 12% per year. The operating expenses for 2026, based on the budget, are projected at $7.3 million and are projected to increase to $8.7 million by 2031. I should say 2030, I apologize. But that's a rate of change of approximately 4.6% per year. Again, the same cost factors that we talked about in the prior two departments: labor costs, insurance, inflation, and repair and maintenance. The one difference here is that there's the purchased wastewater treatment that you get from the city of St. Petersburg, and that cost, just the rate for that is projected to increase at 5% per year on an average annual basis. That's your largest single line item in that department's budget there. Existing debt service, current annual debt service payment is about $1.2 million. That'll be decreasing to just under $1 million by 2030. There's two SRF loans that the wastewater fund is currently paying on. One of them is anticipated to be paid off for 2026. The next one is for 2042. And then there's also the wastewater utility revenue note that is being paid on the Series 2020. So that goes all the way through 2043, total existing debt. We do, as a part of the capital funding plan, are assuming the usage of additional debt. And so that proposed debt would be an additional $2.2 million of annual debt service payments that would start in approximately 2029. And that additional debt is associated with funding a portion of this capital plan, the total capital plan being about $58.4 million. Of which about 34.7 is assumed to be through debt. That's roughly 60% of the total capital plan. And then about $10.4 million funded from rates, or about 18% of the plan. And then about 13.3 million funded from grants and other sources. That's about 21% of the plan. So that increase in debt that we talked about on the prior slide of $2.24 million annually is associated with that $34.7 million in borrowings to fund this plan here. Again, same chart as what we looked at before for the prior two systems, and what you'll see here again is that the bars representing revenue requirements are higher in all years than the revenue at existing rates. Again, just looking at 2026, the revenues at existing rate are enough to cover operating costs, but not enough to cover your debt, then let alone cover any investment in capital, and that's only magnified as things move forward in time. So low growth in customers is what's impacting the situation here. Again, inflationary increase in your operating costs, increase in your purchase wastewater costs from St. Petersburg, significant capital improvement to maintain the system and upgrade service, as well as an increase in your future debt associated with the funding of that capital plan, and also the need to improve this particular department's cash position. The rate increases that we're projecting here then for overall increase in revenue type target, 16% in 2027 and 28 in 29, and then a 5% increase in 2030. That's a cumulative increase of about 63.89%, roughly 64%. That would take an average bill from $95.34 on a bi-monthly basis up to $156.24 by the end. Again, this is all based on the revenues we talked about, the expenses, increase in expenses, debt payments, and the funding of the capital plan as presented. With that proposed rate trajectory, what you'll see is that over time, the rates are sufficient to cover the anticipated operating costs, debt, and capital needs of the system, and also to try to rebuild the utility's cash position over time. So what you'll see is that by the end, we're getting to, but we're not quite there yet, that 90-day target for days of revenue in the fund, again, in order to have sufficient liquidity to account for any contingency events or unexpected capital needs and so on. One thing we had talked about on the front end was debt service coverage. So you do have some coverage requirements with the wastewater system, both for your SRF loans as well as the revenue note. Based on this rate trajectory, the senior lien debt service coverage, that's the revenue coverage on the note, is more than sufficient to cover your requirement there and exceeds it materially. For the subordinate lien side, or your SRF loans, you'll see it start to uptick as those rate increases kick in, and then you'll see it start to go downward as the new debt comes online, those payments start up. But by the end, when the full payment is projected, you'll see that you're at a solid level of about 151% compared to your required target, or your required minimum of 115%. So we're trying to build up those margins so that when the debt payments come online, you have sufficient margin in order to cover them and be in compliance with the terms of those loans. All-in debt service coverage is just, if we were to take all of your senior lien debt, that's the revenue note, and all of your SRF loans and add them together, you'll see it's essentially the same curve. It's just more of a health metric. We try to aim for around 150% here, and when all those debts come online, it's at about 146%, which is very close to that. So it's a very healthy margin there. In terms of average residential wastewater bill with these increases, the first year increase, this would be converted to a monthly basis just because most of your neighbors bill monthly. The current bill at $44.65 compared to an average bill of about $50.17 would be increasing to $51.79, so just a little bit above the average there for that first year increase. One thing I would note is many other communities are looking at their usage rates, and so it's very likely that as any sort of rate implementation plan would be taking place for the city, these other communities are also doing similar things, a lot of them, and so their relative position may be preserved as you move forward in time. And just kind of some evidence of that, some industry trends when it comes to rate adjustments. And this is kind of mixed all over the state, but what we're seeing is in lots of communities, very significant rate adjustments in the past few years and on a forward-looking basis. I mean, we have, the first one showing here in the city of Winter Garden on the wastewater side, there was a 3%, a 17, a 20, and a 7%. Palm Coast was doing 8%ers. City of Groveland did a 40% increase in its wastewater rate recently, with 10% per year thereafter. Wilton Manor did a 30% increase in wastewater. The City of LaBelle did a very significant increase in 2025 of 80%, followed by projected needs of 50 and 25%, 9% per year for Lake Worth Beach, and so on. So what I guess what I'm getting at with these slides is just mentioning this is not a significant increases is not an issue unique to St. Pete Beach. This is actually occurring across the state, and it has to do with increasing operating costs. And a real big one is the increase in capital costs. Project cost inflation has increased dramatically over the past 5-6 years. Construction cost index have gone up well over 40%. Project costs are increasing materially. And so that's having a big impact everywhere. Now, with the wastewater system, like I mentioned, the first year increases are targeted at 16% per year for the first 3 years. And one of the things we were tasked with looking at was also a rate design for the wastewater system. So is there a way we could improve how things are looking at? And based on observations by the city, there was some room to make some potential improvements. So in looking at the existing wastewater rate structure, currently all your customer classes and meter sizes, regardless of the size, pay the same bi-monthly base charge. The base charge includes a minimum flow of 6,000 gallons on a bi-monthly basis. And one thing to note here is multifamily is billed on a per unit basis. So it's the same charges for all classes and all meter sizes here. And again, the charge for any meter size is $95.34. The minimum included is 6,000 gallons. As a part of that, then any flow above 6,000 gallons is billed at $15.73 per 1,000 gallon increment. So we had some observations about that. One of the things that we saw was that commercial customers don't seem to be paying their full share of the readiness to serve or capacity related costs. One thing that's a very common practice that you'll see in utility systems around the state and around the country are customers that have a larger meter size will also generally have a larger monthly base charge or service availability charge, because they can place larger demands instantaneously on the system. The idea being the bigger meter you have, the more you can pull at any given time. And those base charges that other municipalities have and other communities have that scale by meter size are based on the American Water Works Association published hydraulic capacity factors that are used to scale those base charges and upwards. The idea being the bigger meter you have, the more you should pay for base readiness to serve costs, because you have more ability to create demand on the system. This is a very common method. The FPSC, the Florida Public Service Commission, uses hydraulic capacity in setting rates as well. So this is a very common practice. And what we looked at was looking at your classes of service and your billing information. We wanted to see how each class was relating to the average. So what I mean is, if you were to take the total revenues of your wastewater system and divide it by your total billed flow, you get an average cost per 1,000 gallons of $33. We can then look at that same type of calculation for your individual classes, residential versus multifamily versus commercial. The total revenue for each class divided by the total flow for each class. When we do that, we get a cost per gallon of $34.62 for residential, $45.42 for multifamily, $25.42 for commercial. Why is this important? When we compare them on a percentage basis, then, what that tells us is the residential class, on an average basis, is paying 105% of the average cost compared to the system average. Multifamily class is paying approximately 138% of the average cost, while your commercial class, in the rates in its present form, are only paying 77% of their cost. So what that shows is that right now you have some interclass equity concerns here, because essentially what this is representing is that your residential class to a small degree, but your multifamily class to a larger degree, is effectively subsidizing your commercial class. And part of that is, again, since everyone has the same rate structure, there's no differentiation between the classes to account for their different demand characteristics. And in which case, commercial has a much higher demand characteristic because a lot of those are your larger meter sizes. So this here is just kind of to show that the imbalance that was observed in the current rate structure. And so the proposed alternative then to try to remedy that is leaving the residential rate structure the same, leaving the multifamily rate structure the same, but for commercial, creating base charges that then scale based on meter size for those accounts, that scale based on those hydraulic factors I talked about a moment ago, and to also have commercial have all of its usage billed, as opposed to getting the benefit of that 6,000 gallon minimum. That proposal could then be phased in over a 3-year period of time for the base charge phase up. The billing of all flow could be done in the first year. And what this would do is rebalance your revenues and your cost per gallon such that the commercial class would generate additional revenues because it's apportioning greater cost to commercial customers. But again, that's to recognize that their capacity demands and their readiness to serve related costs a bit more equity between your classes. In so doing, the additional commercial rate revenues based on this revised structure has the ability to lower the rate increases on your residential and multifamily classes between 12 and 26% cumulatively over the forecast period. What that rate structure would look like for the commercial class would then be what's represented in this chart here. So you'll see that for regardless of any whatever meter size, whether you're 3/4 inch or an 8-inch account, currently they pay $95.34 bi-monthly. In order to phase up to those standard, industry standard hydraulic capacity factors between 2027 and 2029, you'll see the phase up in those charges over time, going upwards, year by year. One thing I'll mention here is the structure change is implemented over 3 years, and also the increase in the rates associated with the prior slides about revenue requirements overall, that's also built into here as well. So essentially, whereas the 3/4 inch meter would go from $95.34 to $156.24, just like we talked about before, larger accounts would have a more pronounced impact here. The $95 a month in the first year for a 4-inch account would go to $1,154 in the first year. In the second year, it would go to $2,180. In the third year, go to $37.20. And then the last year would just be $39.06. So with this increase, you'll see very significant increases in the base charges for these accounts. But again, what I would mention here is that historically, what's been happening is this class of service of customer has been subsidized by your multifamily and by your residential accounts this whole time, as evidenced by that 77% of system average cost calculation that we showed a minute ago. So what this rate structure would do is generate additional revenues from this class to try to recognize their costs and availability to serve, and address that over time. So this, and you'll see down here at the bottom of this slide, before I go to the next one, currently you don't bill any flow 6,000 gallons or less. Everything is at 6,000 and above. That would change so that all flow for the commercial class would be billed at the usage rate, and then the rate would be increased over time, corresponding to the rate increases we talked about before. So some sample bill comparisons. It's a very busy slide, so I do apologize for that. But what we were trying to do was show for your most common commercial meter sizes, 1 inch for this one, what that phasing might look like at different usage levels from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. So what you'll see is overall that even though we are targeting an overall increase in wastewater system revenues of 16% for the first 3 years, what you see is that the increases felt are going to be more significant than that for the commercial class because of those base charges coming online. And then you'll see that it's the more usage that any meter size might have, that's going to be a bit more muted. So that's why if there's an account with if we look at the first table, 6,000 gallons of flow right now for a 1-inch account is $95.34. That would increase to $301.92, or an increase of about $206.58 a month, or for its bill. That's about a 217% increase in the bill there. But if it's an account that had 24,000 gallons of flow, then it would be a more muted increase there of about 67%. So essentially what we're seeing is that the increases that are going to be felt for these commercial customers are going to be higher than the 16% that we're talking about on an average system approach. But again, that's to rebalance those equity issues. And you'll see that in year 2, those increases are more around 29 to 20%. In year 3, it's about 39 to 25%, depending on the usage level. For a 1.5-inch account, same general idea. The lower usage is going to feel a more pronounced impact, but the higher usage is going to feel it a little more muted. But in any case, it's still going to be higher than that 16% overall system target. Year 1, between 271 and 58% based on those usage levels. 50% to about 27% year 2, 53% to about 29% for year 3. So what does that do? So, just kind of in recapping a bit, the overall revenue targets that we were looking at for wastewater, again, were 16% for the first 3 years and then a 5% in the last year. That's what you see in those first 2 rows on this chart on screen. But based on doing this rate design for commercial, what it allows for is that the residential rate increase, instead of being 16%, could be 13% for 3 years and then 5% in the last year. And it would allow multifamilies increase to instead be 9.5% for the first 3 years and then a 5% increase in the last year. So by rebalancing the cost more in line with trying to true up the fact that these classes have been historically subsidizing commercial, it allows for providing a reduced rate adjustment for these 2 classes. So if we come back to that cost per gallon type calculation, what you'll see is that, again, the existing rates, what we talked about before, that residential class was paying about 105% compared to the average cost. Multifamily was paying about 138%, while commercial was getting 77%. With this rate design that we just talked about, that would pull residential closer to the average, about to 99%. It would pull multifamily down to about 119%, and it would push commercial up to about 92%. So essentially a decrease on an average basis of 6% for residential, 18% for multifamily, and an increase upward to system average cost of about 15% for the commercial class. Now, you may want to ask the question, well, how come not all of them got to 100% perfect? The reason for that has to do with just there's a lot of moving parts in a design like this. We're moving the base charges over a 3-year period. We're changing the flow charges. We're doing all this rebalancing on top of the fact that we're doing rate increases overall for the system. So you can't capture everything in one phasing plan. But this at least brings each customer class closer to the average cost, trying to take the first steps of remedying that issue of commercial being subsidized by the other classes. So it is trying to treat customers more equitably across all classes on a cost per unit basis. And there's nothing that says in let's say, a subsequent analysis that's done by the city, that then you maybe attack this issue a little bit further and try to get a little bit more balance out of it. At least this is the first steps in trying to remedy these issues. Again, this is kind of what I just talked about. This design attempt tries to rebalance the average cost in order to get everyone a little closer to the average. The goal of treating customers more equitably across different classes and mitigate cross-class subsidization. Helps address those issues and provides for a reduced rate increase to single-family and multifamily classes. And also, by virtue of how these increases are apportioned, creates a reduced base charge for multifamily customers at about 91% of the residential rate. And that's important to note because that's also a very common approach that we see with a lot of communities where the single-family base charge, maybe it's $10. I'm just using easy numbers. The multifamily base charge maybe is $9 or $8, depending on their usage and system characteristics. So this design method, by trying to rebalance things to commercial, ends up also allowing for a little bit of rebalance in the end of multifamily as well. Now that was quite a lot of material there. All of it, admittedly, probably a little bit dry. But if there's any questions with respect to the revenue sufficiency side of the analysis, as well as the rate design side, I'd be glad to address them before we move on to the connection fee analysis, which is different in nature.
I had a question on the wastewater meter size, just to better understand these things. Is the 1/2 inch or 1 inch a store that might be on 8th Avenue that would have one bathroom, and then the 8 inch is Tradewinds? Is that how that would be? I mean,
Sean, I'm not sure if you would be able to answer those specifics, but we do have Camden Mills here, our Public Services Director, if Camden can answer that.
I think Camden might be better suited for the meter sizing type question there.
Hey there, for the record, Camden Mills, Public Services Director. I'd have to do some research on like specific property sizes, but yeah, what that in generally, you know, a smaller shop may have a 1 inch type meter, whereas a larger development like a resort would have, you know, 6, 8 inch meter.
that's helpful, thank you.
Camden, I don't know, maybe while you're up here, I don't know if we want to jump all over the place or if we want to take this in order, but since Camden, you're there. I'm going to maybe go back and just, well, timing-wise of like stormwater as a fee and a service. What, could you explain what, or maybe this is for Ref Tellis, what is it intended to solve or really cover for us as a service?
So basically, you know, the bare minimum is to keep up with like our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. So that's something we're required through the APA, through the DEP, on just maintaining our system at a baseline. So historically, that has been cleaning like 5% of your system per year. You know, that just doubled and increased to about 10% in recent changes. So it's baseline the operation and maintenance of the system as well as capital improvements. So, you know, if a grate needs to be replaced or a pipe needs to be lined or pipe, those are the funding that would be used for that. The structure on how the stormwater utility rates are collected, that was based on a methodology that was done around 2011. Where they did it on that variable basis where there's the 2 tiers, where there's the baseline tier and then the second tier is that equivalent residential unit basis. The methodology in that report was based on considering, you know, if we do one improvement in the city, it impacts the entire city. They pretty much treated the island as one big basin, drainage basin area. So that's why the utility rates are able to be, you know, spread out. You know, we may do a stormwater project in one area, but it could be funded through that overarching utility fund rate. We did raise a question to our bond council recently on how that would impact, you know, like resiliency type projects where we're adding in, you know, pump stations and changing kind of the system that we currently have in place. Can we still use that same methodology and apply that as well?
Okay. Yeah, because I think that's one of the things I was confused by, because I mean, so if what I'm hearing you state is that the stormwater fee charged annually is to maintain anything we currently have.
Maintain what we currently have, and really the basis of the stormwater system is to treat rainfall. You know, when all this was set up initially, it wasn't intended for like sea level rise or tidal impacts. It's really structured around rainfall.
So, however, if the current infrastructure doesn't support rainfall, then you would say there's necessary improvements and additional needs for the stormwater system.
Yeah, to
Correct.
be able to.
And that's
support
not
the stormwater.
resiliency, that's stormwater.
Yeah.
Okay, because I think that's really important to maybe make sure we're super clear about that. I think so much, and you already know my feelings on this, is getting lumped under something called resiliency that is actually, we lack stormwater mitigation in this one basin. So I'm concerned maybe, like, first of all, this is fantastic information, and I love that we're gonna shore up getting us hopefully back to healthy state, but in align with what we need to support the current. I just wanted to ensure, as we looked at that stormwater portion, it made me a little uncomfortable that there's like a massive hill or a mountain that's not even being talked about, that we lumped under something called resiliency. And I know it was briefly touched on. I don't know how we'll tackle that then. And are we setting ourselves up to have this conversation again? And we are just trying to tackle this current baseline today? Or what, in your conversations, did you set us up for when you looked at kind of our adequacy of fees?
Yes, I mean, it's always going to be kind of a living thing. You know, as soon as you start your data, you know, it's outdated at that point. So I would recommend every 3 to 5 years we kind of revisit this and do this kind of sufficiency type analysis to make sure it's in line with our capital program. From my understanding, I think it's been some time since we've done this, so that's why I think the hill to climb right now looks so big. Whereas if you're doing this at a more frequent basis, you know, that's a little bit more transparent. But my understanding is those $138 million that was shown on that one slide, that is factoring in those flood mitigation projects within that projected time frame that they analyzed.
Okay, thank you.
I saw that, I mean, you've done a lot of work this year, and the water's flowing out a little bit better, but there seem to be pockets still where water is gathering after the storms, and especially some of the stores down in Paso Grill, that whole area down there by the pier. And there's been a lot of complaints in our area about that. So you touched on the zone piece, you know, benefiting the areas where we're flooding as an idea, another way to look at this, and have the communities where we really need a lot of work done, maybe have a little bit of a different fee structure. I don't think that's necessarily your call, but in this study, perhaps that could be something we look at.
Yeah, if you flip to page, I think 24 in your deck, or maybe it was 22. I forget. I'm sorry. What was the gentleman's name from Raftella? Sean. Yeah. Sean. Thank you. Just to be on the same page with the conversation that we were talking about. It's that one, yes, thank you. Just to show that what we're doing today isn't touching the purple, right? Everything.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
And the reason for that is because the way that you've built presently is based on an assessment basis. There are certain rules associated with assessments that you have to have a special benefit to each property that you can point to. And so since some of the bulk of that 133 million in projects, I'll round for easy here, the bulk of those projects are associated with certain specific areas that provide a benefit to that area and not necessarily to the overall system as a whole. So if we were to think of that $141 million in total projects, the 8.1 million are projects that benefit the entirety of the city, and so they can be included in the assessment. But that 133 million projects are regional in their nature. And so because of that, and for the rules associated with assessments, you would have to have those projects paid by the areas that are getting the benefit. So you would have differing rates for the capital component associated with those projects in order to link that appropriately. And so what our analysis includes for in the rate forecast is the funding of that 8.1 million, but some form of additional analysis would need to be undertaken to look at those other projects, what areas and parcels do they provide a specific benefit to then try to come up with a funding plan. And what I was trying to address on one of the subsequent slides here, if I get back to it, is because some of these projects provide, localized, some of those resiliency fund related projects provide very localized benefits to certain areas of the city. They can't be included in the base fee for service that everyone is paying. They have to be more localized. And so what we've seen done in some other communities is, let's say there's I'll pick on, let's say there's a $20 million project that impacts this one particular area. Then what could be potentially done is you look at the project, you look at the parcels that get a benefit from that project based on some form of engineering study or some analysis that actually models and links those properties to those projects. And then you could, in theory, try to use debt to fund those projects, and then create some form of additional assessment by zone. And the additional assessment is based on the borrowed amount associated with that project for that zone. And then you could pledge that portion of the assessment to that particular debt. It's a little outside my wheelhouse in terms of expertise, but that's how I've seen it done, so that way you have a project that's funded and is being paid for by the parcels in that zone that are getting the benefit. You could have differing capital fees across different zones in order to make that happen.
So essentially, the areas of the city that flood would end up paying more for the improvement to reduce that flooding.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
You pay for what you get.
Yeah. The areas
That's
that
the way I
flood,
hear it.
Yeah, okay.
that zone
It gets,
ends up paying more
Yeah.
under these requirements to mitigate that flooding.
and I understand the difference between, the localized improvement and the general cost to maintain the system. Two different billing components. I get that. What I want to ask now is, as we repair the overall system, and as we improve the overall system, do our repair costs come down on a citywide basis? So is the component of the annual assessment that we charge, we levy for paying to maintain the system, does that cost come down citywide as the system becomes more and more improved? Because there's less to go wrong.
To answer.
What's that?
I'm sorry. I think that one can be a little tricky to answer, because what's also happening over time while you're addressing these various issues is also just the costs of operations themselves and the projects associated with improving and maintaining the existing base level of service increase too. So
Sure.
You're going to have those moving upwards as well. And is it possible that something could go down in the future? Maybe. It does depend on the condition of the system at that future point in time, and also just that since costs are generally always increasing on utility systems, cost of labor, personnel, supplies, the contract work in order to get the projects accomplished, and so on. It's what I think might be another goal to aim for is that the rates at least stabilize in the amount of increase in the future, so not as high increases in subsequent fiscal years. But as far as a potential decrease in the fee, I couldn't really speak to that until you'd have the numbers and estimates at that future point in time 5 years out.
Fair enough. So there's an inflationary component to the cost of repairs. I can get that. By the same token, you've got our system is now, a C+. We get it to an A-. The cost of repairs overall are going to come down.
Should
on a high level.
Should come down, right?
That would be considering, we replace the entire system at one time.
Yeah, you buy a brand new car, you're not going to pay a lot of maintenance for it.
Over time,
Right.
so it's all going to kind of balance out.
and that's
So-
not going to happen.
Yeah, we wouldn't be the whole system.
So the simple question is, in the budgeting, as we look forward, are we incorporating that to say, once we get to that steady state where we kind of get a pretty good feel aside from inflationary costs, as to what it's going to cost us to maintain the system, then do we hit a steady state? Do we not continue to rise the repair component of the assessment? Because at that point, the improvement component of the assessment is hopefully small, if not zero. Because we've already done all the improvements we need.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like, if you do an improvement, let's say, in Paso Grill, your maintenance cost should go down because that's a new capital, but
Right.
then you still have Bella Vista that, needs that high operating cost.
It's a moving target. It's a moving
target.
Yeah, to your point.
Well, this is where I kind of wanted to bring it back to. I think that we need to, I guess, I don't know the lady who was speaking other than Sean on the line, I'm sorry. But with respect to a level of service that we've all been paying into for stormwater, and considering we're one basin, I personally have a real issue with us now all of a sudden turning this conversation into he who floods pays more. Like, okay, so I just want us to, I'm just gonna put that on record, that I think we all deserve a basic level of service in this city, to expect that we have our city providing a reasonable way for us to move around and on our roads without the stormwater. That's all. And so how we break that down and look at what should have been done, or what current infrastructure is in place, is a little bit irrelevant. It's more to me about how do we agree on what we're paying for as a level of service, and we've all been paying for it for however many years, 70 years we've been a city. So as we've all been contributing to the one basin, one city mentality, I would love for us to now, I love that we're having this discussion, but let's talk about what these level of services commitments are, right, that we now can expect, because that's what we're paying for. And $25 a month for stormwater is a steal, right? I mean, compared to, like, that's what we're paying for reclaim. So I would think that even more important, we need to address the fact that we have property protection from stormwater, from basic stormwater. I'm not talking hurricanes and catastrophic moments, so that's all.
To your point on the resiliency confusion, because I have it too, just as a point of reference, outflow check valve baffles or whatnot, that's not part of stormwater capital, or is it?
It has been historically.
Because that's not functional stormwater, take the rainfall, get it out in the water, right? That's like storm related, right? We don't want the so how does that work?
That's a good question. I think this is something that, we've reached out to our bond counsel recently to get an opinion on, because it's really how Sean talked about what we can legally assess people for. I mean, that's the framework we got to work within, is what the
Sure.
state statutes are.
Sure.
But in my sense, those would be not the new system, they're the old system. Those are kind of new improvements.
Right.
But in the past, those have been funded out of that stormwater.
So the good news is we're doing it. The tough news is we got to figure out what fund to pay for and how to get the money into the fund, right?
Right, okay.
So,
Now, I go back to a question. Does this presentation, I assumed it said there's some regulatory requirement that the area that floods has to pay more. That's what I heard.
I think what I heard,
So it's,
A future proposal.
oh, sorry.
I think she said it was a future proposal to assess whether that should be done or not, over and above the increases.
But is there some regulatory requirement when that assessment is finished?
The property that pays is supposed to be the property that benefits.
Okay.
So if you're paying for it, you should get some benefit out of it.
so if you replace the main drain line in Paso Grill, just to be vague, the Paso Grill folks are going to pay for that as a component of an
Well,
assessment.
right now, the whole thing has been treated, the whole island as one.
Yes.
As one, okay. So somewhere there's a line
Pick it up,
between,
and that's different.
yeah.
So it may change in the future.
Only if you want it to and get more complicated.
Yeah.
All right. Good. So we have some control over that. It's not a mandate. So,
That's correct.
The courts will uphold any rational basis.
And the rational basis that we've been talking about is improvements in the city anywhere.
Citywide.
Should be citywide paid for.
That way
We should
everyone's
all-
paying the same amount.
We all pay the same amount.
You gotta draw the line
That's our
somewhere.
water utility structure currently, yeah.
And the way it currently is, and we proceed with all the improvements that we need. And there should be equity between all the payers, and that includes commercial versus residential, which today doesn't exist.
That's right.
When-
So slide 30, where the other issues were there, where we started talking about the zone, I think that's the one, was a proposal for the future review and discussion, not necessarily
Today.
ratified as.
Yeah.
And one thing to note, you know, this study was really, how do you get revenues to sufficiently cover your costs based on our current methodology? We didn't analyze what that current methodology is for that collection. That 2011 stormwater assessment study that created that methodology, we're still utilizing that.
Thanks, Canada.
Of the three funds, the stormwater, the reclaimed, and the wastewater, to me, you know, the stormwater is pretty straightforward. There's a lot more complexity in the reclaimed, and then you get to the wastewater, and you're like,
Well,
my head explodes.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, and in the reclaim, I have a question. We had an active program to repair reclaimed lines from the main line to the house,
the lateral.
laterals. Is that still happening?
That is still happening, yes,
Okay.
sir. So
What-
that would really, that's a bulk of the capital cost, and, yeah.
So that's been ongoing. What percentage of the city is completed?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I have to dig
Okay.
further on that. But basically, my understanding is all the services need to be replaced, and we
Right,
got
that's-
quite a bit to
we've been
go.
talking about that for years. So, and we're also repairing on a daily basis.
We're repairing on a daily basis. If it's a location that's been repaired multiple times, that's one that we would look to replace rather than continue to repair. And then we try to line up our repairs with our street paving program. So if we know there's a road that has bad pavement condition and there's been several reclaim repairs, before we go and repave that road, we'll replace all of the reclaimed lines.
Thank you.
Jack, to your point, if I can follow up on that. So we've got, you know, we're in the middle of a process of repairing our laterals for our reclaim. Do we know where in the process we are? Are we like third of the way through it?
I don't know that off the top of my
Do we
head.
know when we're going to be finished?
It'll be at least beyond our current like 5-year planning horizon. So that's, I guess, why my urgency of pinning that number down. I know we got to do this for at
I
least.
know it's a tough question, there's no answer to, but it's, for me, it's more of a, you know, when does this end? You know, folks watching, myself, all of us, are like,
It's been going on for years.
yeah, and we know what the problem is, right? We know what the solution looks like. We have an idea about what it's gonna cost and how much we can spend and how much work we can actually get done in like a year. So how many years does it take to finish the project?
Yeah, we
I
can
mean, that's-
come up with that number. We can look at what we've done
Right.
and project that out.
I think that would, you know, bring a lot of comfort to a lot of folks on our island here. To just be able to get a snapshot of,
When's it gonna be done?
yes,
It's
sir,
going to be done.
yes, sir.
And my estimation, it'll be beyond 5 years, but we can look at, you know, what that projection is.
It sets expectations,
Mhm.
and it gives everybody goals as to, oh, that's not where this is, or that's, you know, it's,
Yeah, there should be a period of time too where, you know, we get all the reclaimed laterals replaced. Your main line's still in good condition. That was put in, you know, early 90s.
Right.
So there, you know, could potentially be a couple decade
What is
gap.
the life expectancy for laterals versus the main line?
Well, typically you'd want about 50 years. The issue with our laterals was it was a newer type pipe material at the time when we installed, so it was low cost, you know, great option, and then over time it turned
was
out
junk.
to not be. Yeah, nobody uses this material
Okay.
anymore.
it was a manufacturer's defect in the material, from what I understand.
Mhm.
Okay.
Why are we
So,
not?
so what type of time frame did it take for them to originally be installed?
I believe they were that same time frame.
All of them were installed in the exact same, what, 1-2 year window?
I don't know the exact.
Okay, I know, it was way before your time. But, you know, I guess the question on that is, if they're all in the same desperate position and they're all failing, is there any, I would ask, like, can we accelerate it to get it knocked out in a couple of years as opposed to 5+ years?
We
Because otherwise
just
you're
have to
just
increase
spending
that,
so
like-
much money on repair, right?
It comes down to the money.
So,
Yes.
okay. But if we have a guaranteed revenue income stream increase or something, like right now, we have the opportunity to do that. If we said a rate change to X instead of Y in year 1 and 2, and then it comes back down in year 3, 4, and 5, I think to your point, because now we stop, I don't know, spending the bad money, which is
stop
the money
bleeding.
of repairs and tearing up roads and stuff. Like, we could just say, I know this is gonna, you know, kind of stink for the 209 or 2,900 account payers, but we're gonna raise it for these 2 years and then it's gonna come right back down. Like, and we can knock this out. Like, is that an option as we're looking at this?
I don't think 2 years is an option, no. I mean, I'll dig and get that number.
Okay.
Again, I think it's going to be at least beyond 5, but it all goes on to how much money do you want to spend? You know, we're going to increase our program on reclaimed laterals, and we also need to replace our paving program, because you don't want to replace all these laterals and have utility cuts, so it's
Do we have,
domino effect.
Okay, yeah, so please lay that out. I think that's so smart, because I think right now we do feel like, we're like, oh, if we're spending all this money on repairs, that feels not like the
Yeah.
best way to spend money either, or your time, quite frankly, you know, patching roads. But maybe you have a better overall layout of this timeline and why 5 years is smart. Great. I just, that would be helpful to lay out as we look at these rate changes.
We-
Yeah, I know historically it's kind of all triggered on the money. You know, every year we ask for, you know, resurfacing money and it comes out to a certain amount, and that's what we have to base the program on.
do we have a rough number as to what it's going to cost to fix irrigation, or excuse me, the reclaim throughout the city?
We could provide that number.
I mean, I think that'd be a good number to have. That'd be a good starting point to say, okay, it's going to be, you know, X number of millions to do the whole thing,
I
right?
mean, what's in your budget now projects what that's going to cost through the next
Yeah, and you can
years.
slice and dice it however you want, right?
And it sounds like you have to lump in roads with it.
So,
Yeah.
it gets complicated really fast, right?
Potholes.
There's a repair component, there's a replace improve component. I know there's leaks on my street that have leaked, you know, 4, 5, 6 times in the same place. The county comes out, repairs, half a year later, it's leaking again. There's got to be a division of cost, effort, and labor between the county and the city. I mean, can you give us a real quick, high level, how that?
So the city pays the county to maintain and operate the system. So when maintenance is done on a reclaimed lateral service, the county performs the work and then bills the city for it.
So it's
The
not,
cost of that repair is a fraction of what a replacement is. So in some senses, you know, it may make more sense to maintain it a couple times than a full replacement.
Are there inexpensive ways to, you know, reline, repipe, you know, inside existing, working, bad pipe, we run a new, good pipe?
Not with laterals.
No?
yes, the pipe's too small.
They're small and they're flexible. They deflect.
I know I'm jumping around over here, and before, thank you for being here. Thank you and the staff for everything you're doing. I'm the new guy. Be patient with me. So,
Absolutely. Any questions?
why are we not billing based on usage? Do we not have the meters in place?
We don't have the meters in place.
There's no meters. And the cost of meters, we talked about in the past, would be significant.
It'd be a big capital
Yeah,
project.
big capital project.
But on that note, because I had that same thought too with reclaim, just, so we charge based on parcel size is what I heard from Reftelis. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Yes. Yes, parcel size?
Yes, and there's not equity between residential and commercial.
So if you got a really small lot, hopefully you can pay less than a really big lot pays.
Okay.
No,
No?
Oh, okay.
residential,
Where I'm going is, just to clarify, like you said, like if there's certain parcel size, like, you know, Serrata and Tradewinds and, you know, even the Don Cesar, and we see all their fabulous fountains running all day. I mean, is there, it would seem like it would be helpful to go one level deeper into looking at, I don't know, even if it's zones or something that we could attempt it, and maybe if you don't believe that's a smart way to look at it. But I loved where we were going with some of the other conversations with wastewater. Obviously, that was very comprehensive. And I'm not expecting us to go to that level with reclaimed, but I had thought I recalled that we thought about maybe some general zoning metering that would then allocate it more, maybe more equitably is the right word, for particular zones.
Right. Yeah, I know the city in the past had looked into metering some of the hotel district areas just to kind of get an idea on how much they were drawing. That didn't actually play into fruition, so we're not
That was a
currently
project.
measuring all those. But that was a project,
But it
yeah,
died.
several years ago.
It was definitely a project that was thought to be moving forward, but it never moved forward.
So without meters, we can't do the classes like we did in the wastewater section?
Yeah, you can't do it based on usage without a meter.
Yeah.
I will say some of the redevelopments that are coming through, they will be providing meters as part of that.
Good.
But at that
If we
time-
wanted to revive the metering by zone kind of discussion, what would that entail? Or why, or do you-
proposed capital project.
Yes, capital project.
Okay.
But you raise a good question. I mean, as it stands now, does, a small parcel pay the same as like a double parcel with one house on it?
Sean, could you speak to that?
So there's a base fee for all accounts of $25, and then beyond that, it's a function of size. I'm trying to, on my other screen here, I'm trying to pull up where that breakdown occurs for y'all. If you give me just a minute, I'll
And then more to the point, for the sake of time,
get it on my end.
not only for right now, but for budget publishing, how much wiggle room, leeway do we have to make significant changes to this before we roll out next fiscal year's budget?
So as it pertains to wastewater and reclaimed water, those are fee structures that just require a resolution and ordinance by the city commission. Our stormwater is different since that is on the tax rolls, so that one would have to be a consideration likely for next year, just depending on the calendaring. I know Ralph and Kathleen and I were looking at that because we have to send out notices to every resident that we would be making that change, and there's a lot more to it.
So what's our deadline for wastewater changes for next tax year?
So wastewater we
Stormwater
could
or
do.
wastewater?
I'm sorry, stormwater.
Let's take it one at a time.
Yeah, let's do stormwater.
I think next July.
Next July. We got a year?
Well, I think you're gonna miss this one.
Okay.
What would it take to not miss this one?
What's that Cher song? If I could turn back time.
I mean, are we past it, or if we made a decision next week at the commission meeting to move ahead? I mean, it seems like a really reasonable thing. And
Hillsborough, I think, did their ad today in today's newspaper. The trim notices, I think, are going out July 15th. It's pretty, we'd have to really scramble. I don't know that it's ready.
And that would be for...
That's a shame.
That would be for stormwater,
Yeah, which
because
is,
that's the annual assessment.
That goes on the ad
In a relative...
tax roll, because the tax roll is the problem.
Okay. And that's like, what is it, like $200-300 on average per parcel? What is it? What am I paying for stormwater? I don't know.
currently, you're paying $95.34, no, you're paying $183.75.
Okay, I'm paying $200 a year for
Most likely.
stormwater.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
So
it
that's
should go up to 211, but apparently we can't, so we've just totally set ourselves back.
Yeah. But that amount is less than what we all pay every other month for water and sewer.
Exactly.
So in a relative scheme of things,
Okay.
maybe we put that on our agenda to do before a year from now, right?
Well,
I don't know.
one of the things we have
We
to
can
basic-
look to see what we can do this year, if anything, if we increase the rate, if we can get it on. So we'll look at it.
Yeah. What's the,
But we have to go through the city council to get the
yeah.
decisions.
Even a modest increase, if we can do it, and, I don't know.
It's a $30 difference in our tax bill for a year. So I don't know how that works, but okay. So that's stormwater.
Not that I'm here to raise,
And then you said reclaimed and wastewater
Is Sean here?
could be done with what was the method?
I think Sean wants to add something.
Oh, sorry, Sean.
No, I just wanted to chime in. The question that a minute ago was asked. So the base fee for reclaim is $25, and then it increases as a function of size if you're multifamily or commercial class type. And the way it does that is on what's called on an equivalent residential unit basis, and that's defined as 3,150 square feet. So in every instance that the parcel is greater than that size, there'd be an additional charge of $25 per ERU. Again, the ERU being 3,150 square feet as based on your code.
For reclaimed?
Yes.
Yes, for the reclaim question that was asked a little while ago.
Reclaimed is based
On an
on
ERU?
ERUs?
$25 base plus a $25 ERU for 350 square feet, is what he said.
Per ERU for, so if I have 7 apartments on a double lot, am I paying 6x what my neighbor's paying for across the street?
Did you hear that question, Sean?
So can you say that again, please?
If I have 7 apartments on a double lot, am I paying 6x what my neighbor across the street is paying for a single-family home on a standard lot?
My understanding is it's for each account there's the basic service. So I think it might be based on how the accounts are entered into your billing system, and then beyond that it's a function of the size of the lot itself.
But
So
not
basic
ERUs?
service would, oh, sorry.
But not ERUs? Does ERUs factor into the billing for reclaim?
Yes, ERUs for, let me put this on screen. Something should superimpose over the Q&A slide. So for reclaim, I don't know if you can see this.
Yes, we can.
Basic service, $25. And then for multifamily, commercial, and public use property, it's $25 for the first ERU, which is considered 3,150 square feet, and then $25 in addition for every additional 3,150 square feet. So it's a function of the size for multifamily, for commercial, and for public use, is how you have it structured right now.
Okay, and this is a ordinance, not annual, recurring bill. So without getting in the weeds here too fast, because we've got so much to look at, can we schedule this for a future agenda? Because what I'm seeing here, unless I'm hearing it wrong, is if I have a quadruplex on a regular sized lot, I'm paying reclaim for 4 ERUs. Whereas my neighbor might have the same size lot as me, and it's a single family dwelling, and the neighbor's paying 1x.
So I guess the question is that ERU factor in
Why does
parcel size,
ERU
property size, or floor area?
Yeah, I mean, you've got regular parcels with lots of tiny apartments on them. Should we be charging them a lot more for reclaimed water?
Well, it's not based on the number of apartments, it's based on the size of the property.
Well, what I just saw is it said ERU, which is the number of dwelling units.
So a single-family property, so I'm switching the view here.
I don't know.
That's what I was.
Let me,
What's the definition of the ERU?
Right,
Here, is it the same as like?
Lot size or, yeah.
Well, if it's a quadruplex, it's 4 units.
Equivalent
If it's a
residential
duplex,
unit,
it's 2 units.
ERU.
Reclaims for like irrigation water for landscape.
Yeah, yeah. And if I've got 4 units on a standard sized lot that you could put a single family dwelling home on, we should not be charging that owner 4x what we're charging the neighbor who has a single family home, because it's
Well,
the same.
isn't the reclaimed water just like sprinkler
It's-
system?
Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
So it's, all 4 of them would get the benefit of the one sprinkler system.
Yeah. But you've got 4 apartments on one lot, and next door to it, for example.
and it's a function of the permeable area of the parcel, so the portion that can be irrigated. I tried to pull the code on screen, where it says, single-family property shall be considered one equivalent residential unit. The equivalent residential units of all two-family, multifamily, commercial, and public-use property shall be calculated by dividing the permeable parcel area by 3,150 square feet, and then rounding to the nearest whole number. So if you have a property that has more units on it, but it's the same size property, and it's one of those classes, I would imagine you wouldn't run into that 4 versus 1 issue for the same property size.
Sean, you're doing a terrific job on keeping up with us here. Thank you for that. That next chapter down, that paragraph, chapter 3. All two-family, multifamily, commercial, and public use properties shall pay to the city a monthly user fee for the first ERU and for each ERU thereafter.
But the ERU is defined as the square feet.
Well, above, the definition is equivalent residential unit.
Right. I'm confused. So,
I don't know the answer.
I don't know the answer either.
But ultimately, what you're getting at is this should be an equitable,
Yes.
Oh, yes.
equitable treatment of the way that we allocate the charges for
Absolutely.
reclaimed, and I think that's what we would have to just
That's
bottom out
correct.
on.
Right.
So-
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
that's what we want.
So I think that's the message.
And that goes for all 3 funds.
However that shapes up and relooking at this code.
Yeah.
That goes for all 3 funds, as far as I'm concerned. They need to be equitable,
Yes.
fairly
Yes.
implemented, and commercial versus residential. And we should have the goal, all funds should be funded. All of our
Yes.
enterprise funds.
Not operating at a deficit.
Yes.
Yes,
Should be
agreed.
funded, not
No reserve. Yeah.
taking money from everywhere.
Yeah.
The funds, people, we need to start paying
Self-sufficiency.
as residents to support those 3 funds,
Right.
whatever it takes, in a reasonable manner. And some of these things are laid out nicely. We have some options, and the citizens need to be, and the businesses need to be paying, so these funds are self-sufficient.
Just in order to make sure we're able to get a recommendation to the commission, would it be helpful if we just went by fund and maybe started with reclaimed, and this group can determine if they want the first rate scenario or the alternative rate scenario, and then we can
Let's
just
do
kind
that.
of work
Just-
through
I
it?
have 2 more questions
Okay.
on the big stuff. So one of the things I noticed on reclaim, just before we leave that fun topic, we haven't beat that horse to death, it talked about a purchase rate expected to increase 5% annually. Like, we purchase this reclaimed water, right? Sorry?
From the county.
Oh, okay, yes. I don't know how the county gets the water, but, I know I've had some neighbors tee up, well, we have this way to, I guess, Don Cesar used to have a water tower, and, I'm not suggesting that, or anything, but I just wondered, some of my neighbors have said, well, is there some way that we can be better, reclaim water collectors and be actually contributing, kind of like we do with the electric grid and solar panels? Has there been discussion like that, or is that just out there in left field and should?
I don't know, not to my knowledge, that there's been discussions of that. Just my initial thinking would, you'd have to have some kind of water treatment plant to collect it and process it and treat it and turn it from.
Because there's no way for us to feed that back in, just like with our wastewater, we
No, it's-
pump that, lift
No, it's
okay.
not like
There
a cistern that you
would
can
not be a
repurpose.
benefit
It's
to
just
like
exploring that.
saying,
Okay.
You need a
why
whole
can't we include the stormwater
Okay,
in reclaimed water? In other words, collect all the stormwater and send it to be reclaimed.
Yeah, some kind of desalination plant and.
probably the juice isn't worth the squeeze on that, is that what you're thinking?
Probably not on this size island.
Okay.
With no open space.
Okay, and then on the wastewater, this may be more for Sean, but I guess I was surprised. I saw stormwater, we have 7,656 accounts. And then I'm thinking wastewater, wouldn't that be very similar? Why do we only have 3,600 accounts for wastewater?
So Let me go there. So what you were picking up on there was a mistake on my end. The billing data that was provided for stormwater was provided on a parcel basis, and then for each parcel, what are the equivalent residential units? So it was 7,656 parcels that were billed. That's comes to 7,738 equivalent residential units. The parcels can be distributed between accounts, differently. And so when in that first iteration of the presentation that was provided, that originally said accounts, and that was a misnomer on my part. It should have read as parcels and ERUs as opposed to accounts there. I think that accounts for some of that differential.
With wastewater then, is the third, yeah, okay. So you're just saying it's the ERU orientation, or this new customer class orientation addresses why there's a discrepancy with that.
If
I'm trying to, yeah, I'm still.
I saw that too, and I was like, and I thought, well, maybe that's because we've got multifamily and because we have condos.
Yeah.
So there might be one meter or whatever for a parcel with like 50 condos. So that might be 50 different water billing accounts.
Okay.
And 50 different ownerships
Okay.
of
Right.
one parcel. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Nope, that's great. And then my last question, reserves at 90 days, is that best practice in our neighboring towns? Do you know, are they all doing it at similar level, or is this why 90 days versus 120, or I don't know, what is a reasonable reserve for a barrier island like us?
No, that's a good question. So it varies by community, and to some extent their risk aversion. I have some clients that aim for a minimum of 90 days of revenues, but with a more optimal target of 120. I have some clients that aim for no lower than 120 with an optimal target of, let's say, 150 or 180. The reason we aimed for 90 in this particular analysis was just to, again, we're trying to balance a couple of different issues at hand. There's the issue of just overall funding the plan, right? The cash flows, if you will, paying for operations, paying for projects, and paying debt, while also maintaining your metrics, and then trying to build cash, remove reliance on general fund transfers and so on. So there was a lot of different issues to attack. And so, 90 days as a first target over this 5-year window, we felt as a group would be adequate to, improve liquidity and maintain liquidity in the systems. But we didn't want to try to make these increases any more burdensome by trying to aim for 120 or 150. So that's part of the answer. Another part is it can vary based on the nature of the system being analyzed. So for instance, on, let's say, your wastewater system, you have a lot of costs and the potential for fluctuations in revenues there, because depending on how customer behavior is and how much water they use will determine how much wastewater they're billed. So you have more volatility in the revenue. So perhaps on a wastewater system, you may aim for 120 days instead of 90. Maybe in, let's say, a stormwater system that bills on an assessment basis, there is no real variability in your revenues there because there's no usage, right? It's just a fee paid once a year. So there's more stability in the revenue stream. So maybe you can target 90 days or something like that. We aimed for, so they can vary across systems, but we aimed for 90 days across all of them just to try to have a point that we're aiming at to improve the overall current condition. But in our mind, in a subsequent analysis, maybe that, slowly aims upwards to 120 or something, depending on the system. So it's just a function of the nature of each system and the current situation we were in. We didn't want to aim for a higher target in this instance just to do so, because that was going to make the rate increases even more burdensome.
Okay. I mean, I did my back of the napkin math that I shared, and just in the end, we're talking about a monthly change for a resident in the neighborhood of like $22. So I just would, across those 3 buckets, if you happen to use all 3 of those things, if you look at 2027, the difference between basically 88 and 110, right? So I would just encourage you then, Sean, to highlight that 90 days is like the bare minimum when you talk to the commission. And I would love to know, what does 120 look like? I just would rather have us rip the Band-Aid off and like look at what does it mean to be healthy and more best in class than just getting by. Because I think we have been trying to just get by and defer things to a point that it's painful. My personal opinion.
Oh, no, your point's well taken. I think it's just, what's the appetite of the community to absorb that, Could you go to a 120-day target over this forecast period? Sure, of course, the increases will be higher in order to get you there. And, it's one of those, it's not necessarily a math issue, it's more of a feeling issue. What is everyone comfortable with absorbing over that window? But I get your point. If it's not an overly burdensome, nominal dollar amount, then could that be looked at? And I can easily update that for myself and have that in my back pocket.
That's great.
But Kathy, I think these are just base fees. These are not all the other ones that are on top of it. Because if you got, like what was the one I was looking at?
Reclaim
Wastewater.
Yeah.
Is that the one?
These.
Where there's extra fees on top of the base fee if you use so much.
The wastewater is, 0 to 6,000 every 2 months, and over 6,000 plus an incremental amount.
That's what I'm,
Right?
that's what I was
what
getting
you're.
at.
It all gets very confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reclaimed is a flat monthly fee, as far as I understand.
Right.
And on that, real quick, Sean, just from a housekeeping standpoint, these 3 different water funds, I'm assuming you're going to present this to the commission. I have found myself scrolling back and forth. It's like, is this slide wastewater, or is this slide reclaimed, or is this slide stormwater? If you can, I'm suggesting that you label each slide with what fund it's part of, because they all start to blend together when you're looking at this
Good point.
as a whole.
Well, and I think what's on this piece of paper here at our seats
I handed that out.
should be a slide.
Yeah, this is an excellent analysis, right? This is the kind of stuff that people understand.
That's what I needed for myself personally. I was like, well, it's $22 difference a year. I mean, yes,
Right.
if you use more than
Right.
the 6,000 gallons, it could change. But if it's $22 change, and possibly a year that our taxes are going to go down as residents, and kind of, it's a good year for us to look at this and put it in context. What are we digging ourselves out of, and
Exactly.
putting ourselves in the right position for?
Thank you for doing that, because I was doing it in my head.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And along the same lines, if we can do this same thing with, and this is one of my notes here, where I wrote down how much of the monthly fee goes to regular maintenance. So we can take the regular monthly fee, whatever we suggest it be, whether it's this or that, and say, of that, this is what we pay for maintenance, and this is the other piece that we pay for capital improvement, CapEx, right? And because we know that CapEx is going to stop at some point, and we're going to be,
Maybe.
we're going to have a golden system, right?
It'll never stop.
It'll come down.
Yeah.
It should.
It should.
Yeah, it should. And that, I'd like to see that decrease in the CapEx and the modest, inflationary increase in the repair and maintenance as part of that graphic that says, here's where we are, here's where we started, and here's where we're going to be when we're finished. And this is the curve of the spending. And this is the month or the year where we're charging you $37.50 a month for your reclaimed, and of that $37, $20 of it goes to, and $17.50 goes to, so people can, I can relate to that. So that's one of the things I had. As far as your question, Devin, should we do the preliminary water revenue cost fee, or should we do the revised? It's such a minimal change from a accounting standpoint and a buy-in standpoint. I don't like seeing a 50% jump, whether it's a small number or a big number. I don't like seeing that. Because I know that if we charge 50%, all these future years are going to be smaller. Well, a year later, we need to charge another 50%, and all the future years are going to be smaller. I would rather see the same small number over 5 years or so.
That's the alternative.
Yeah, I think that's the alternative.
Yeah, that's my preference
Yeah.
as well.
And it also gives us, all of us, the consistency and the planning ahead, and we're not knee-jerking costs, and it's just. On the flip side, I know, Karen, you're probably going to say,
Yeah.
I'd like to see it all come in, just get it done.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the debate, really is.
Okay, so sounds like from the three for reclaimed, the preferred alternative at the 18% is what the recommendation to the commission would be.
Yes, do we need to take a motion?
Does Kathy have to weigh in?
I didn't mean to put you on the spot on that, Kathy, it's just kind of,
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm supportive of getting us back into the black on all of this.
Yes.
100%. My opinion on the wastewater is absolutely we should have rates based on the customer class there. And I think to our previous dialogue with Reclaimed, as we look at that code change, like let's just make sure we re-look at that to understand how that's aligned with parcels and lot sizes, and I guess the actual surface that is being addressed. Yeah, I don't know, for example, even, and if possible, I'd love to see the capital project for zone metering appropriately, like at least just teed up, if we think that that is a worthy path forward to getting the allocations to the, maybe the big businesses and hotels versus the residents. If it's not worth that, and you all have that background, great. But right now, that feels like another reasonable one to consider. And stormwater, to me, it's about a level of service that we are one basin and we are one city, that we need to have just a basic level of service that we are delivering with that stormwater fund. And if it's about maintaining current versus needing to add some new, I think that should all be in there. And then maybe we can have a separate dialogue around what is resiliency and sea level rise implications.
Devin, do you need us to like formally accept the alternative one, or what?
We could probably, I would defer to either Jenny or Ralph, but I think we could just do it all together, if that works. So just on that first one, so reclaimed is the alternative. Stormwater is going with Ralph Tillis's recommendation, and then wastewater was looking at the alternative as well. Did I capture that correctly? Okay. Okay. Well, with that, Sean, did you want to take them through the next part of the presentation?
Before, I would like for us to further dig into the way that we bill for the wastewater and the water. It's beyond the scope of today. It gets really complicated. I want to applaud Sean and his group for what they've done to try to offset the inequities between single family, multifamily, and commercial. And we're definitely going in the right direction with that. That's because I felt for a long, long time that smaller multifamily properties are being hit with some stupidly high water and sewer fees because of the fact that it's ERU based. So I don't want to get off on that now, it's too much, but if we could, at the board's, the group's agreement, we could maybe look at that in the future.
I think just clarity on the ERU definition as it relates to that.
Absolutely, yeah.
How do you apply ERUs to the different funds?
Yeah. And then the difference between the 18% for 5 years versus the 15 scale, Brandon, it's not going to make any difference in how much we get done in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. We're like 15 now or 18 now, right? The result's going to be the same. What we put in the ground is going to be the same, whether we charge 50% next year for 18.
You're talking about reclaimed?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're kicking the can on $700,000
Is it
for
gonna
the
make a
project,
difference?
so it does make a difference.
Is it, are you gonna do more? If you have more money, you're gonna be able to do more in a year?
We would, I think what we have recommended in our current capital program is what we would recommend.
Which
They
means
wouldn't change
you-
it.
Means you bump up 50% one year and get it back. I mean, how many years have we not been paying what we should have been paying?
Well, if that's the case, then we have to
Forever.
charge the additional $3, $5.
I agree, I think we should.
Since we set up the enterprise fund.
I think we just ripped the Band-Aid off on that one. And
Yeah.
I mean, on that note too, we said we have 20, if we can trust these numbers, Sean, 2,900 accounts with reclaimed. And you said low growth, maybe 2 accounts a year. I mean, I don't know what, if maybe nobody has landscaping or something. I don't know what the rest of the parcels do, or if does that cover all the parcels? I'm sort of confused by the different language of accounts and parcels and ERUs right now. I mean, I know what they all mean, but I don't know how we're counting them. So with reclaimed, it would be helpful to know if there's a way to motivate, because certainly we're in a drought, we'd rather have you use reclaimed than, our potable water as a source of taking care of, your yards. So if it's such a low number of accounts, I'm just scratching my head with either, how do we light people up to activate their reclaimed systems? So that's good for everybody. And maybe there's a 1-year incentive if people are using potable, where we get them in the system and then they can start contributing to the overall infrastructure costs. But I don't know how many laterals, for example, are sitting out there without being turned on. And I think that would be an interesting number to know,
Right, and
if that's an activation opportunity and a contributing to the overall fees.
Kathy, where I am, there's 3 houses in a row, and they all have the exact same sized yards. 2 are grass, and 1 is fake grass, artificial turf. And the artificial turf doesn't use any reclaimed water.
Okay.
So we have to be careful with optics from that kind of thing.
Oh, sure.
Not having meters helps, but.
As long as they're not using our potable water. That's my only point, was
Okay.
like, if you have
That's
that,
fair.
yeah.
And there still are some stone yards.
Sure.
Yeah.
So just for my clarity, are we staying with the proposed reclaim at the 18% flat, or?
I don't know if we've decided as a group here. I go back to the base question. If
I'm good with making the 50% and then shifting back to 8 or whatever it was. I don't think we need to go to, that's just my opinion. So if the rest of the group wants to.
But what I understood,
I like
that
the
none of
shifting.
that, the outcome was the same on both.
But it's not, because if you don't make this change, then it's a delay of $700,000 from his capital improvement plan that was outlined somewhere in here. So it does have an implication to the projects that we are saying we want to have done.
maybe that's an answer from
Yeah, right here.
Sean and Camden. I don't know.
Overall reduction, this was page 18 or on the slides, or page 19 of our packet. The scenario to mitigate front-end loaded increase by phasing in capital spending over the forecast period, it's a reduction of approximately $700,000. So we'll get to the same funding levels, but that doesn't mean we're going to get to the same impact on ultimately having
Yes,
the
you're right.
system in place. That's why
It will take longer at 18%,
Yeah.
than starting with the 50.
Camden, can you do more with the 50% out the gate?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think what's in there now is reflecting on what we're proposing in the capital budget. So if we were to not go forward with that, then we'd be
Yes.
decreasing what we're proposing.
Oh,
So,
that's.
I mean, you're going to pay for it one way or the other, now or later. So it's.
So if we give it to them, they're going to spend it.
More laterals get done, everybody.
I know that puts you on the hot seat because you're like, oh, how much work can I really sign up for with more money? I only have so many people. I know so much.
I wouldn't sign up for more than what we proposed in the capital. That's already pretty ambitious. But I would say, consider resurfacing as part of that. I wouldn't substantially increase the laterals if you're not also increasing your paving program.
Okay. I think that's a really good point too. What, we're at 1.5 million for the paving program annually, and so you double that if you had 3 million for your paving program.
Exactly, and you would double your amount of laterals. Yep.
Okay, so you could execute it faster if we had more for the paving program.
And there's probably better savings too, because you can lump more of it together in a short amount of time.
And
Are we having a presentation on the paving program?
No, the paving was part of the capital projects program that we had talked about, I believe, at the last meeting.
Yeah, okay.
So I would say, because it's such a small number, and if it makes a noticeable difference, then yeah, let's do the 50%. It's not going to be a 50% increase perception. It's going to be, oh, my bill went from $25 to $37.50. So big deal, right?
Okay, I changed my mind.
Yeah,
50%.
yeah. There you have it.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Now, and the other
A
ones.
convincing argument there, young lady.
Again, the total nets out to about $22.
That's reclaim. The wastewater,
I mean, for all
totally different story.
for all of them if you look at a monthly change to your bill, it will be about $22, unless of course you use a tremendous amount of water, right?
Or
Over
unless
your
you're
6,000
commercial
gallons.
with a big meter.
Well, that's true. I'm just talking about a resident right now, so you're right.
So, and are we scheduled to get into the meter size thing now? Is that what's up next? Is that
Oh, the last thing was the
Connection.
the
Connections.
the connection? Okay.
Yep.
I'll shut up.
What else do you need from us, Donna?
I think I've got it. So just to recap, we're going with the 50% increase on reclaimed. We're going with the stormwater recommendation, the alternative for wastewater, and then we'll hear from Sean about the connection fee study now.
And the alternative for wastewater is the flat rate for 5 years.
The alternative is where,
The design approach.
yes,
What?
go ahead, Sean.
The alternative would be the design approach that I talked about with the commercial base charges increasing over 3 years and then billing all the flow such that it provides additional revenue from commercial to mitigate the increases on your residential and multifamily.
Yeah.
customer class rate structure.
Yeah, and Sean, I can't, words cannot describe how you hit that out of the park, buddy. I mean, that's brilliant. The fact that you notice the inequity, the subsidy from one class to the other, and you designed a solution for that. That's perfect. It's a great start, to your point. Because we're not at 100% equity, but you told us that we can get there. So that's why I'm suggesting we revisit this later.
And just to note on one of your comments, the observation is actually provided by the city manager, and so we then looked into that and proved it out, in the numbers.
Right. Well, then,
So, credit where it's due. She had the hunch.
you'd be thanked as well, so that's good. Thank you.
So for my purposes, I do have some notes here. I'll make sure to label each slide, not just the title slide for each section, but I'll have an item on each one that speaks to what system it's a part of to help for clarity. Just as a back pocket scenario, I'll look at what the 120 days of reserve looks like for the various funds, just as an incremental increase should the question come up. I can also develop a simple pie chart slide that speaks to the percentage of the rate that's associated with your operating costs versus your capital versus your debt, kind of an overall picture to address that item.
Perfect.
I think those are the ones for the slideshow.
And then
There was one more, Sean, but you can't see it because it's on a piece of paper. It's just a summary of the increases for the residents by year across all three.
Right. No, I did have that one. I accidentally skipped it. Total bill increase for all. Yeah.
And then
Okay.
Sean, on slide 50, when you were presenting that, you mentioned that the numbers here are based on an average of $33 per month, or $33. when I was looking at this the other night, I was like, that's the number I was missing, was the $33 average, and it's not, unless I'm missing it now, it's not on the slide.
It's not an average per month. It's an average per 1,000 gallons of flow.
Okay, there you go.
So
There it is. So
yeah.
if you use 1,000 gallons of water, your bill is going to average out to be about $33. So the 33 average.
Well,
cost, that's the baseline.
I'll say that a
for
little
these
differently. So essentially, it's the total revenue. Let's look at residential here. The total revenue generated by the residential class from base and usage charges. If we take that number and then divide it by the total billed flow for that same class, you get a cost per 1,000 gallon of flow. And so that's what that 3462 represents for residential. That's what the 4542 represents for multifamily, and so on for commercial. The system average is then the sum total of all rate revenues divided by the sum total of all flows.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily the bill. It's more just what I was trying to do is, in order to compare each class on a similar term, the term is then, you know, cost per gallon or cost per 1,000 gallons. And so that's more so what that represents. So to try to link that back to a bill amount might be difficult. It's more of a unit of measure to address this very issue.
Okay. I understand that now.
I don't know if I made it worse.
Confusing me at first. And then on the other note that I made on slide 55, there's 3 sections. There's the top section, the middle section is residential, the bottom section is multifamily. I'm assuming the top section is commercial.
The top section was kind of the base scenario, the overall increase to revenues that is projected with the forecast. So if I go back a couple slides, when we were talking about the overall cost of the system and the revenues at existing rates in totality, not broken out by class, what we were showing was, you know, the revenues were insufficient to cover everything. And in order to get from this chart here to this chart here, where there's the revenues at proposed rates that cover all the costs, that's an average increase in your system overall revenues of 16% per year. So I was just hearkening back to this particular slide when it comes to slide 55, is I'm referencing that item, that overall basis, what you're trying to do is increase revenues for the system by 16% per year for the first 3 years. But because of this rate design, commercial takes an increase that's much higher than that, and as a consequence, residential get an increase that's lower. The 13% in multifamily can get 9.5 instead of what would have been 16 had you gone with a uniform approach to everybody.
Okay. So shouldn't we have an average commercial bill to compare to?
So that's where we had some of these slides here talking about your more common meter sizes for commercial, the 1 inch and 1.5 inch. The reason I didn't mention 3/4 inch is because it would just be the 16%. But these that are having the structure change, anything above the 3/4 inch, your 2 most common meter sizes for commercial are 1.5 inch and 1 inch. So this is the bill comparison for them at different usage levels. To try to show, depending on what they use, they would have a varied impact.
Okay. So
But the thing with commercial, oh, sorry.
I guess, does that mean there's really no quote unquote average commercial bill to compare it to? I'm just looking for something simple for me and for the commission and for the residents. Oh, okay, well, here's an average residential bill, here's an average multifamily bill, here's an average commercial bill. It seems we're missing the
Sure, I mean,
average commercial.
yeah, no, that can be prepared. Instead of these ranges of flow, you could just look at the average flow.
All over the place.
So what do we do with that?
I may have not heard that. I didn't hear the
said,
beginning
so
part of that.
What do we do with that? How do we present to the public and to the commission a simple comparison between residential, commercial, and multifamily?
I mean, we can
Yeah.
definitely prepare a comparison that's based on an average bill for each one of these meter sizes. We just wanted to show the ranges because depending on the range of flow that an account might have, their bill impact would be very different. That's what the point of this was trying to show, that if
Right.
you're a 1-inch account in year one that uses 10,000 gallons of flow, your increase will be 137%. But if you use 24,000 gallons of flow, then it's more like 67%.
Right.
So, an average would definitely be within here. It's this was just intended to show the kind of the sliding scale.
Maybe
But
there's
we
not
could
one average,
definitely
but
make a slide that shows here's an average 1-inch, and this is what it would feel to try to simplify it.
sure. I think it's important to include that because if we don't, we run the chance of someone coming back to us and saying, and because this is a huge increase in the billing for the commercial side.
Well, I think the simple way, I thought you had it with just cost per 1,000 gallon, like that page. Right? So you just put and residential is all gonna be, the 1/2 inch or, so I think something like that on page 50/51 in our package, something of that nature would be a useful way to just look at it. What is instead of trying to guess what the bills would be. I mean, based on the alternative proposal, the commercial would just be, and maybe multifamily, I don't know, would be based on their water line size.
I mean, just keep it simple, all right?
Yeah.
I would like to see one page that says, here's what the average cost is going to be for a single-family home for water and sewer billing on St. Pete Beach. And here's what the cost is going to be for multifamily per ERU. And here's what the cost is going to be for commercial,
Page 52.
52.
I think that does it. The 3/4 inch, you just say AKA residential, and then you'd have to know, I guess, as a business or potentially, I don't know if multifamily has 1 inch or 1.5 or 2 inch or 4 or 6 or 8, but I think it's all right.
There you go. That's it.
That's the
Yep.
page.
That's
that
it.
you need.
Brilliant.
That's it.
Brilliant. And see, that is what is important to get out there because if you got a 6-inch meter, God forbid you have an 8-inch meter, if you got a 6-inch meter, you got some pain coming down the pipe. No pun intended, right?
That's why I asked,
Yeah.
what is the character of the
Yeah.
place that has those
Yeah.
big ones?
So we need to get that out there, and if we don't get that out there, someone's going to come back and say, you guys didn't let us know about this. I got a $2,000 water bill, and it used to be $100. What's going on with this? We can't let that happen. Because it looks like that's going to happen. And we're going to get blowback on that.
Even if we get blowback, it's very difficult to get this information out and to know the public actually looked at it and got it.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I don't know what the answer to
Like I
Neither
can,
do I.
Yeah.
There will be many, I'm sure, commission discussions, and then if it goes into it's a code change, or how does this one get implemented?
For this one, this would be an ordinance
An
change.
ordinance
Yeah.
change, so it would come in front of the commission many times through readings, and
Twice.
so they would have many opportunities to engage.
Yes.
And after this is reviewed at the
Yeah.
commission.
Yes.
So I think that's the way we do it, just like everything. But
Yeah.
agree, it's about equity and it's about getting us back in the black.
Yeah.
And this presentation is public information.
Yes, and the commission will be seeing the same presentation at their workshop next Tuesday on the 14th.
Next.
And Sean, can you do 2031 just like you did with all the other ones? I noticed wastewater is missing 2031. I don't know why we stopped.
so for that one, it had to do with what, the link to the capital plan that we had access to. So the capital planning document that we had with the project listing went through 2030 for the wastewater, but for the others, we had a little longer horizon.
Okay.
I do have a note here for that more simplified rate comparison for commercial to try to illustrate that at a more average bill in addition to those more complex ones. So I've made that in my notes here for updates.
That'd be great.
Connection fee, yeah?
So,
Connection fee.
Connection.
with that, do we want to move to the connection fee side, or?
Yes, we're good.
Okay. So the wastewater system connection fees, these are capital charges that are designed to recover the capital cost of your conveyance or transmission facilities allocated to new users. These fees are not charged to all residents, they're only charged to new development. So these are growth-related fees. But it does provide a benefit to existing residents because to the extent these fees are at an adequate level, it ensures that your existing residents aren't paying additional costs associated with capital to provide service to growth. So these are definitely important fees to have. They provide an additional capital funding resource. Though, in your community, it's significantly reduced just because there's not a lot of growth, but they're still important to have because they, to the extent that they're at an adequate level, it allows you another funding source to help mitigate some impact on your ratepayers. The major tasks involved in the connection fee analysis for the wastewater system, we have to evaluate your connection fees based on, recent and localized cost. So in order to do that, we first analyze the existing investment in the wastewater system. So that's the total investment in wastewater related assets and infrastructure. Excuse me. And then we net out from that number any capital assets that were funded through grants, because we can't charge growth for something that didn't cost you any money. So there's the existing investment component in the infrastructure for wastewater. Then we also look at the proposed capital improvement plan and incorporate the planned expenditures and investment in wastewater infrastructure. And we net out from there any renewal and replacement type projects or future grants. So now what we do then is we have the existing investment in the system, we have the planned investment in the system over this period of time, and we use that, and then we look to the capacity of the system, because what we're trying to design is a fee per unit of capacity. Excuse me. And look at your level of service and design it accordingly, so to update the fees. So it's essentially a cost per unit analysis based on your existing investment and planned investment in wastewater related infrastructure. This is just essentially the derivation of that cost per unit. We get that whole capital investment number, that's your investment to date and your planned future investment, divided by the capacity that it relates to of transmission capacity. Then that cost per unit applied based on your level of service for wastewater gives us a connection fee per your level of service, or per ERU. So existing assets in service, based on the asset records provided to us as of the close of fiscal year 2024, there was about $47.2 million in total assets for the wastewater system, of which about $46.1 million could be categorized as transmission and collection system related. About $1.1 million are machinery and equipment related, or manholes. So we exclude the smaller, shorter life type items like the machinery and equipment items, but we include anything that's transmission and collection related. So of the $47.2 million in total investment, we're including $46.1 million from right out the gate. Then from there are about $3.5 million in assets that are then also excluded because they were funded from previous grant funding, and we can't include grant funded assets. So then we net those out to get a net includable amount of existing assets of about $42.6 million. So that's what the fee is based on in terms of the existing investment in the system today. The city's total conveyance system capacity is about 3.19 million gallons per day on an average daily flow basis. You're currently flowing around 2.6 million gallons a day. So you're using about, that means that there's about just under 19% of the system still available to provide service to growth, and your current dwelling unit factor or level of service per ERU is at 250 gallons a day. In terms of planned capital investment, the capital plan has about $58.4 million in projects, of which $12.1 million is recognized as being expansion related and a portion to new growth. About $18.8 million is recognized as being upgrade related and a portion to new growth. And then about $27.5 million is excluded from the analysis because it's associated with replacement type projects, and we can't include those in this type of analysis. That $12.1 million that I mentioned a moment ago as being expansion related is expected to provide an additional 0.625 million gallons per day in additional capacity to your transmission system. So you have about $12 million in projects that are expanding how much flow you can move across the system. You have $18.8 million in projects related to upgrading the system, and those amounts are included in the analysis. So when we do that and we take the total investment to date that's includable, the total planned investment that's includable, we add that together and divide by the total capacity of your system. We get a cost per unit of capacity in terms of gallons per day. And then we scale that based on your current level of service, which is 250 gallons a day. And what you'll see here is your existing fee per unit, per ERU, is $3,216 per unit, or roughly a cost per gallon of $12.86. So it's essentially that 1286 times the 250 that gets you the 3216. Based on the updated analysis, including all those investments you've made since the last time this type of study was conducted, as well as your planned future projects that are includable, the calculated fee would then be $4,649 per unit. In terms of gallon per capacity, that's $18.60. So essentially an increase in the total fee per unit of $1,433, or just under 45%. So a notable increase here, but again, it's a function of the investment that the city has made in capital to provide service to growth and to maintain service levels as it continues to expand the system. With that, here's a comparison. Similar to the ones we saw before, but just for connection fees for wastewater service. You'll see the current fee for the city, that $3,200 level, going up to the $4,600 level there. It is on the higher end of this comparison here. You see that the average of the surveyed communities comes in at about $2,076.95. You're going to see a lot of variation in impact fees, or connection fees here. And that's because, again, it's a function of, what level of investment do they have? So I'll give an example. We're in communities where we're seeing a lot of new upgrades, expansions of capacity, and updated analyses. Their connection fees per unit are increasing materially, and it's because capital cost inflation and so on. In communities that have lower connection fees, it's oftentimes because they either haven't done a connection fee analysis in quite some time. It can be a function of that they have older facilities that have excess capacity to serve growth, so they're not having to develop new facilities at these higher costs that we're experiencing now, and that provides them the ability to have a lower fee. So there's a number of different reasons why you'll have differing costs per unit. Also, the method by which it's treated and other things. So it can vary there. So again, this is on the higher end of the comparison, but that's based on the maximum fee that we believe can be calculated based on the capital investment data that's been provided to us. So this one's a little more straightforward. Again, it's a cost per unit based on existing investment and planned future investment in projects that are associated with maintaining and providing service to growth as it occurs in the city. If there's any questions on this one, I'd be glad to field them.
I do have a question. When do we charge the connection fee? Is it all brand new construction? Or is it, my house got flooded, I tore it down, I have to rebuild it?
It would just be for brand new construction. If someone's house was, like you used in your example, flooded and destroyed and they had to rebuild, this would not be a charge on them. This would just be for new construction or redevelopment that is larger in its impact than what it was before. If you had a property that, let's say, was a small one with a 3/4 inch meter, that property gets demolished and built, and that the connection then required to provide service to that property when it's redeveloped is a 2-inch meter, then they would pay the differential between the 3/4 inch fee that was paid previously and the 2-inch. The increase in their demand, essentially, is what's being captured.
Okay, that seems fair. But if I tear the house down and sell a lot, bare lot to somebody, does the impact fee that was paid way back whenever convey to the new owner, and the new owner does not have to pay a new impact fee to build a brand new house on a patch of grass?
I believe that depends on your code. I want to say that normally if the property is sold, demoed, and built into something similar with no difference in the meter size, then I think the fee carries over from before. There's credit for that. Because it's not a new impact to the system, it's just a change in what's on that site.
Yeah.
But if it was to be expanded upon, that it would need more capacity of the wastewater system, then you'd have an issue where an incremental portion of a fee could be charged for that increase in capacity that they're reserving with that new expanded construction.
It's like an impact fee.
I know, I was just gonna say, I think we should just rename this an impact connection fee or something.
impact
Just
fee and-
add the word impact. No, don't? Oh, okay. But I think the idea of it is
Don't call it that.
an impact fee, so let's just call it a connection fee. I feel like that would be a better name. For whatever reason. So, oh, we hate that. Okay, no. This municipality's connection fee. Got it.
Call it in.
All right, gosh. Come on,
Sean,
Ralph,
as a
keep us
follow-up,
square on this.
As a follow-up, do you have a projection of what the real-life impact of this is going to be on this built-out sandbar that we live on here?
What are you saying?
How many connection fees
Will there be?
will
How
there be?
many new units? Because there's a lot of redevelopment, right? And we don't include the existing ones that are being
Right.
redeveloped.
Yeah. We're
This
going
would
to
be
get one or
above
two.
beyond
We're
what
not-
units existed, say, before the hurricane.
We're not talking about a lot.
No. And on that, before you answer that, that one slide, I think it's 60, with the math equation on it. I love math, 'cause I'm such a nerd. It would be helpful, we're running out of time, so I'll shut up. It'd be helpful to use the $500,000 example home in this case too. And we're going to see that in the next slide set, where we say, here's what your tax is going to, your property tax is going to be next year for your 500,000 square foot home. And it breaks out this way, boom, 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 boom. We use the same example with the connection fee method. If you build a $500,000 or $500,000 home, you create additional connection, not impact. then these are the numbers that are going to show up there. That's
So
slide
the
60.
one thing,
Maybe that's slide 60.
the one thing there is oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
The one thing there is that with the connection fee, it's not a function of the value of the home. It's just based on what meter size is associated with that property.
Okay.
So it's if the meter size was made larger, then we could have something like that. But if it's like kind, I don't think that'll.
So
The
let's
500,000.
3/4 inch meter
Sorry.
as an example. Put it in real world terms. And then I'll follow up and shut up with the final, which is what's the real world impact? What do we anticipate for fiscal 27 as far as connection fees?
The impact would be pretty small because the anticipated growth in the forecast is small. Now that was based on new accounts. To the extent that you have information that relates to redevelopment that would require larger meter sizes, it may be more impactful. But I would need to know or have an estimate of what that is. So the connection fee revenue right now, if you're looking at 2 brand new accounts a year or 2 new ERUs a year, then it's going to be very minimal revenue. It's because it's just going to be the 4,600 and change times the 2 units. So you're talking, let me go, 4649 for 2 units. So just shy of 10,000
Right.
versus the fee right now, which is would be 6,400. Now, again, it depends on what level of redevelopment and are they changing meter sizes. We didn't have that information, so I couldn't quantify that for you, but at least straight line, just based on the simple growth assumptions we have, it would be a very small increase.
And then it's caused me to think further. We've got some large hoteliers that have multi-year, multi-decade development plans. We've got a density pool that's floating. Has anyone run the numbers on what these connection fees might look like if we maxed out, we used the entire density pool, we maxed out the development? Obviously, we're still under total capacity for the wastewater system, but if that scenario actually happened, what would the total revenue from connection fees be? I think that's a valid question.
Still, not a lot of money.
I don't know what the number is. I don't know how big the floating density pool is right now. I should, but I don't.
Again, I would need some form of information as to what the maximum units would be and how many of those would be additional and what they're, because it can vary based on the meter sizes. So that's a tough one to get at without that kind of detail.
Okay, thank you.
But I do hear the question, what's the bang for the buck here?
Yep.
Yeah, it's to me, I think this is a reasonable increase.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I think we should move forward.
Yep, let's do that.
Okay. So near the end here, just have a slide on summary observations and conclusions. So, general observations, across all 3 systems that we looked at, revenues are at existing rates are projected to not be, sufficient to cover the projected revenue requirements for each system. The main issues, again, being operating cost inflation, low growth environment, the need to fund those capital improvement programs, the need to then pay the debt payments, the increase in debt payments associated with funding some of those capital improvement programs, to also reduce reliance on general fund transfers, achieve and maintain an adequate level of reserve and liquidity in each system, and to make sure that you're in compliance with your debt service coverage requirements as you move forward. So this is our conclusion recommendation slide. Adopt proposed adjustments and wastewater rate design. alternative one, that's the one we talked about. I think it was already mentioned, but we also mention it here, continue to update this plan periodically, every 3 to 5 years. That way you can make sure that the rate plan adapts to changes in project capital costs and timing, changes in any growth and development or changes in operations or operating related type costs. And the rate proposals that have been brought forward are projected to achieve and maintain, positive cash flow, maintain and meet your coverage requirements, and also to maintain that minimum cash reserve. And then specifically for the wastewater side, that rate design is projected to address some of the equity concerns between some of your customer classes. With respect to the connection fees, it's our recommendation to adopt the wastewater connection fees, always comply with Florida statutes as it relates to fee related items and implementation, and to also update your connection fees periodically to make sure they stay up to date for customer growth, capital cost, changes in your system's capacity, and so on. Yeah. And after 72 slides, I think you're done hearing from me.
Hey, Sean, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
I would love to go a step further, though, on your observation slide and say that our goal is to eliminate a reliance on general fund transfers.
Love that.
Absolutely.
So it's not to reduce. And in fact, if we're not paying back, I think, I would love to be seeing these paying that general fund back so we can actually apply it to the other capital projects we have.
And get some done.
So, thank you.
I can update that language.
Thank you, great work.
Very good job.
Yeah, excellent job.
Thanks, city team, for doing all that. We needed it. It's
Yeah.
A lot of
overdue.
hours.
Let's do it again next year. That was fun, right? Okay, maybe every few years.
Okay. Is there any other question or item I can help address, or are you all on to other topics, and I'll leave you all alone for now?
If you have best known methods on how to roll it out to your community, we can talk about that offline.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yes.
Any
Very good
benchmarking of other communities. But I don't know if that's in the contracted agreement we have with you to share, but you could just point us in the right direction. If you
Reduce
know
the
anybody
pain.
has done that recently, that would be awesome.
We tried to speak to, in that one slide, rate adjustments in other communities. It's really just everyone is being impacted in this manner. This is, I just did, another study that was, significant double-digit increases on an annual basis. It's unfortunately because of, how capital costs have been increasing, general inflation overall. It's just placed a real burden on utility systems, especially the past 5-6 years. We even see it on the municipal side when it comes to like providing fire service and police service and those sorts of things. The cost of a fire engine, 5-6 years ago was maybe, $600,000 or something, and that's now, pushing $1 million. So it's impacting everyone everywhere through these types of things. But
Thank you.
okay, well,
Thanks very much.
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. We're just waiting for IT to tee up the next presentation. Okay, perfect. So for this section of the presentation, this is going to focus all on our ad valorem property taxes, which is our single largest revenue source. So I'll take you through some of the revenue history, how the millage rate has moved, where residents' tax dollars are, where they go, and what our rate options are in front of us for fiscal year 27 from the assessor's office. So before we get into the numbers, I just want to frame what we're asking of you tonight. And so we are looking for the committee to give a recommendation on what millage we should propose to the commission and how we should factor that into our 27 budget process. So our first section here, here is a chart that's showing our ad valorem revenue from 2020 through fiscal year 26. The solid dark blue figures are represented our audited actuals from our annual comprehensive financial report, and 25 and 26, those were projected. And so you can see that trend line is a kind of a rising steadily. The key point though here is this growth happened while the rate was either flat or falling, and so this just shows the rising in taxable value for our community. So the city held a flat millage rate for nearly 9 years at 3.15 mils. So for fiscal year 2015 through 2023, then in 24, the commission actually reduced the rate to 3.0913, which is a cut of about 0.06 of a mil. So when the revenue is going up, it's not because the rate was raised, it's actually because that taxable value rose. So this slide answers the question of what we hear from a lot of residents: where does my property taxes actually go? So using an illustrative of a $500,000 taxable home with a total bill of around $8,135, the city of St. Pete Beach keeps about 19% of that, and the other 81% goes to schools at 40%. Pinellas County at 29%, plus EMS and special districts. So when a resident's tax bill goes up, most of that increase is not the city's levy. So it's just worth noting that for our constituents.
And the only thing we can, sorry, just to chime in, the only thing that we're going to talk about is that 19% line.
That's correct. Yep, that's the only thing we have control over.
Yes.
So this slide models out the new Senate bill impact. So if we hold the rate flat at that 3.0913, at that rate, the city is about to levy about $15.22 million. The Senate bill reduces our ad valorem revenue by about $1.1 million, or about 7.2%. And so if we applied that apportionately, to an average 500,000 home, the city portion drops to about from 1,546 to 1,434, or 112 annually. So the point is that even if we're holding the rate flat, residents would see a modest reduction. But it's also important to note that that wouldn't be for this fiscal year. That would be for fiscal year 28, but just a consideration. So these are the three FY 2027 rate options per what we received from the assessor's office. So on gross taxable value of $15.17 billion, the rolled back rate would be 3,075. By statute, that generates the same amount of revenue as the prior year and is legally a no tax increase. The flat rate is 3.0913, which keeps what residents pay unchanged and yields about $80,000 more than the rolled back rate. And then the 2/3 maximum is the 3.8330, which requires a supermajority vote of the city commission and would generate roughly $3.8 million more. One clarification, again, is that this would not impact our 27 rule. This is for the Save Our Homes. If that were to pass in November, that's a 2028 factor. So looking at this slide, you can see if we were to look at an average homestead, this gives you the figures of what those dollars would be a year. So you can see to do the baseline, it's about $123.16 a month. If you did the rollback rate, it would save $7.45. And if you looked at doing the maximum, that would be $354.59 a year. So you can see those figures there. For context,
Back to that one. That wasn't in our. Was that in our deck?
yes, sorry. I added this one just for the record. This slide and the next slide was added as a request from committee member Garchow. So I added those in there.
Yeah, this is really helpful. So, and we can come back to look at it. I just wanted to digest it. So really, you're saying, one, we couldn't actually implement this though for 2027?
You could implement this for 27.
Yeah,
Yes, these are our rates.
These three in front of us are what we need to recommend.
Yeah. Okay.
We got to pick one of those.
Yes.
recommend to the commission.
Yep.
And our current baseline, you're saying,
Is the 3.0913 mils. And our rollback rate is less than that
okay. And it is
because
like
our assessed
$300
value went up, so they have to,
difference, okay.
yes.
While we're on this, we don't mean to interrupt, but does the tax assessor's office levy value on vacant land that was recently, the house was recently removed? Are they paying tax on vacant land value, or are they paying tax on the house that was used to be there that's no longer there?
I believe it would be on vacant land value, but I could get back to you on that to confirm.
Is that, I mean, the numbers are what they are. You already have the numbers from the county.
Mhm.
So however they calculated it is the way they calculate it. So the number's set,
Right.
correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just for context, you can see how our rate compares to our neighbors. So across the 24 incorporated Pinellas County municipalities, St. Pete Beach ranks 15th at that 3.0913 mils based on our 25. So we're a little bit below the county median. You can see Bel Air tops the list at 7 mils, and then followed by St. Petersburg, Clearwater well above us. So this is just our city millage only, excludes obviously county, school, and special district levies. This slide is giving us an example of who actually carries the tax base. So non-homestead properties, which would include hotels, condos, or investor-owner occupied units, makes up about 71% of that taxable value, or roughly $3.48 billion. Generates about $10.75 million of the levy, and our homesteaded is at that 29%. So that is just a good example so you can see what those different impacts are as we look at some of the taxable value options. So this is just looking at residential versus commercial. So about 79% of our taxable value is residential across the roughly 7,000 parcels. 21% is commercial at about 850. So this just is reinforcing that predominantly our residential barrier island community, which is meaningful for some of our commercial base concentrated in the retail offices, hotels, and restaurants.
Citizens pay the taxes, essentially.
Residential units, yes. So on our next slide here, you can see this is a detailed breakdown by property use type. So you can see that single homes are the largest single category at 39%, followed by condominiums at 25.5%, and then hotels, condos, and hotels at nearly 16%, which reflects that tourism component to it. And then commercial, multifamily, and the smaller categories fill out the rest. But this is just useful for us to look at as we're thinking about which properties drive our revenue and how sensitive with any of those shifts are in any one segment. This is a very detailed impact table. So average annual city tax by per parcel, by parcel type at each of the three rates. So the current is the 3.0913 column is the baseline. But you can notice the difference between the current and the rolled back rate is a few dollars to $10 per parcel for most of the categories. That jump to that 2/3 max is far more significant, especially for commercial or higher value residential. I'm not going to read every single one of these rows, but just wanted you to be able to see how these impacts come across. And then finally, just to give kind of a forecast of what it would look like based on the different rates. So you can see for an average parcel on the rollback rate, it saves about $100 over 10 years versus the current. The 2/3 max adds about $4,773 per average parcel over that period. And the citywide rollback cost to the city is about $0.8 million over 10 years, while the max would generate $37.9 million over the 10-year period. So with that, I'm going to flip us back to this slide, and if we could...
And you looked at it over 10 years because why?
It was an option that we have included as last year was the first year we started kind of sharing out some of this information, looking at our 10-year forecasts. If we were to consider any of our large capital projects, it's just giving you an example and an idea of what that 10-year period would look like.
Because it obviously changes every year.
Right, yes. And that's why a forecast, even after 1 or 2 years, becomes fuzzy.
Right.
But I
And
love,
you and staff put all this together, this
Yes.
Yes.
and it's brilliant. Thank you
Thank you.
for doing it.
Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. There's only one piece of housekeeping that I saw. If you go back to the really complicated slide with all the numbers and stuff on it, there's the yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I'm assuming the yes, no is whether they're homesteaded or not.
That's correct.
Okay. And it shows 2 commercial properties as being homesteaded, which I found pretty interesting, but let's
Yeah,
not get off topic on that. So
We could
you
do-
might want to clarify, you might get that question from the commission, what's the yes, no? So, anyway,
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. Thank you for that point of clarification.
I love the thread of questions, if, just on the note of can we do anything with that 10-year forecast that enables us to do any different bonding scenarios for our city? No.
That would have to be a referendum. We can only bond against ad valorem with a referendum.
Understood. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
And the 2/3 max, that's for both homesteaded and not homesteaded.
Correct. Yep, so it's one rate that's applied to the entire,
All properties.
all
All
properties.
properties.
That's right. So with that, what we'd be asking for is what the committee would recommend for the commission and for us as we're planning out our budget to determine the rolled back rate, the current rate, or a 2/3 vote.
And this is for this coming fiscal year.
That's correct, for our 27 budget planning.
Based on the fiscal situation we're in, my feeling is we should go for the 2/3 max millage rate.
I was surprised to see that we were so much lower than some of the other
I was too.
areas.
I was too.
Yeah, I think with the 2/3, it puts us right in line with Treasure Island. We're still going to be, basically number 14 in the area. And I think with a $260 million mountain to climb out of capital improvement projects, I think there was 80 listed that you all shared. I think raising the 3.8 million next year and it's about $30 more for 500K. For every 500K of appraised value is what I understand. It's about $30 a month more, $354. So I think that breaks it down for me to say that would make a big difference for us as a city in our state.
The slide that is up on the big screen,
Mhm.
the 2/3, 1832 a year.
Yes.
That's the portion that just goes to state.
That's yeah. So if we do the 2/3, we're increasing everybody's tax by $360 a year, which is $20 a month.
$30.
$30 a month.
$30 a month.
$30 a month. I mean, if we couch it like that, it's oftentimes not so much the message, but it's how you make the message, right?
And part of that could be that slide, as Kathy mentioned, where we are in Pinellas County. We're not number 1,
Yeah, yeah.
14, 15.
Man, I was surprised to see Pinellas Park was higher than we were.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, I tend to agree with the 2/3.
Okay.
We need to,
Does that take a supermajority of the commission?
yes.
Which means, what, 4 out of 5?
No, 3 out of 5.
3 out of 5, right?
2/3.
Well, 3 is the minimum.
Oh,
So
yeah,
four.
true.
It'd be 4 out of 5.
4
4 out of 5.
Well,
If we suggest the 2/3, well, whatever we suggest, the commission's going to do anyway, what they want to do. That's right.
Right.
yes, but if we strongly suggest, and it sounded like all 4 of us agree, we make a motion that we recommend the 2/3 vote
Right.
and raise the millage to 3.8330.
I like the $30 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the price of a cup of, you know.
It's actually $29.50 if you do the
It sounds like,
A cup of coffee.
save the
Less than-
whales.
less than
Save us
30.
save the whales, send us $30 a month. Yeah. Right?
And can we get you, Camden, to tell us what 3.8 million buys you?
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody want to make that motion?
Because honestly, our 3.8 million will buy us a lot more next year than it will the following year, and
Well,
et cetera, et cetera.
that-
So that's why I think we got to put money to work for us
I like
now. And we know that our city will go after every grant we can with funded projects differently, and all of that's going to like help us marshal things forward. We've got to start tackling this thing. So I know, that's where I'm at.
So anyone want to make a motion?
Well, is it a motion or is it a recommendation? A unanimous recommendation of a 2/3 max majority.
Well, either way.
We don't have.
I make a motion to recommend, yeah.
Oh, okay, we need a
Yeah.
motion.
We have to say that. I make a
Would be helpful.
Okay, I make a motion to recommend the 2/3 vote max
And
I
that's the
second.
what millage rate? Say that,
at,
3 point.
it went away.
3.833.
Thank you. 3.8330.
So you want to second that?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
So we can move on to our operating budget presentation. A few caveats on this. Obviously, since we're going to be factoring in some of the fee study information, the reason why you don't have a preliminary budget is because there's obviously these moving parts here with the ad valorem as well as the revenue. So at our next meeting, you will have that. So I will take us pretty quickly through the operating budget, and then I will just be looking for if there's anything in there that this committee would like to provide feedback on or make changes to, and so I'll just take us through the presentation.
And if I know we probably all looked at it briefly, but I think one thing that would be lovely is just like you did for the capital improvement projects with the workshop that for the commissioners, is maybe put this all on like one sheet that shows all the line items with the up down arrows, because I know some of the things you're like, it was a bit of a balloon squeeze, like you moved things, so it could help correlate the big picture shifts with all in one page, even though this is a better presentable format, and Ralph likes presentations and I like spreadsheets, so you can hit all your constituents. So it's just an
That's a good
aside.
idea.
In the next, you guys will have the 210 pages. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
and I know Ralph has a hard stop at 4:30 too.
Okay.
So I'll take us through this as quickly as I can.
2 minutes.
Does that mean we adjourn at 4:30?
She can't be here and I can't be here.
I got pickup.
And it's 4:30.
Well, you did. Well, you could keep going, yeah, you don't
can
need
keep
me to
going.
be here.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
okay. I'll stay as long as I can.
Okay, perfect. I was able to get somebody to get my daughter.
Okay.
I have to pick her up, but so we're good. Okay. All right. So as a reminder, just wanted to re-put the slide in front of this committee where you can see that the city manager asked us to hold our FTE flat, no increases, modest CPI growth, and then looking at phasing in balancing our operating and our maintenance budgets first. So just wanted to show, as we were building out this budget, kind of what our thought process was. So this is a very rolled up all funds picture combining all 9 funds. So you can see that our total revenue that we're showing, which will change now after the presentation that Raftelis gave us, is 73.03 million. And 88.2 million with an estimated ending fund balance of about 26.5. So while that gap may look a little bit alarming, it's normal and intentional. Mostly one-time capital and resiliency spending was the intent here, so that we could continue to complete capital projects, and as those wind down, that gap would shrink year over year. So what's kind of driving some of the changes in here? So we last year utilized for the cost of living adjustment for our staff was the May CPI, and so to anchor to that same figure, we're looking at 3.2%, which is about 1.5% greater than last year. Employee insurance, we had a flat renewal last year for our insurance, and this year we're looking at 3.5%. which is just based off of our claims and experience and the entire pool that we're in, because we're in a pool with a lot of other municipalities. Workers' compensation, property casualty, those two are unknown right now as far as our renewals. So you'll see that once we have that figure, we'll update that. And then I've said it at the last meeting, and I'll keep saying it until this budget's adopted, that capital project numbers are going to just keep shifting as Camden and his team are completing work every day. So that budget will decrease or will be reappropriated into that next year. So just wanted to pull out those caveats. So looking at our city commission, you can see that 17% change. The Finance Budget Review Committee last year did propose a raise for the commission. So with that not being a consideration this year, we reduced down that figure. So that's the primary driver there. For our city clerk's office, you can see that it's essentially flat, about 1%. Just some modest records management and personnel growth, which is just offset by some of those lower one-time items. Looking at the city manager's office, about 4% down, which is a slight reduction in operating and contractual costs. Holding that staffing across the board, you'll see as we move through the presentation. In code enforcement, this increase was driven by required code enforcement training and professional development. They're required to keep up with CPEs every year, and so with that training, we had to include that increase this year. Our city attorneys is a contracted outside law firm, not an in-house department, so there's no FTEs. This does include a budgetary figure for any special counsel. So that's where that increase of $25K is coming from. Community development, so you can see in here that there's some growth with some of the benefits as well as operating professional services. So just some increases in what they're planning on working on in the next fiscal year. In IT, this is largely increase in consolidating all of our IT related costs. So previously we had where a department might have a software system kept in their own budget. We allocated that out to IT so that they're able to monitor, control, to make sure that if someone has an Adobe account over here, that we're getting that nice bulk discounted service and they're able to manage it for us. So we are cost allocating those out as part of the offset to it. So that's the reason for that 12% jump. And then in our human resources, you can see that there's some expanded staffing and support programs. So we switched to a new payroll system. We're actually going live this week, which is our NeoGov applicant tracking system. So that is the driver that we're looking at as it relates to human resources. In finance, this is just a modest growth around that 3.2, cost of living adjustment. So you can see that we're holding flat as it relates to our FTE count as well. Law enforcement, we received this number from the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. So this increase is just going off of what it costs for them to operate and maintain and have a police force here in St. Pete Beach. Fire suppression, so we did have the wage reopener that was approved by the commission at the last meeting, but that's offset by our lower capital outlay. So you can see here that we're actually about 1% down in fire suppression. And in EMS, the big drop is we had some one-time capital vehicle purchases that rolled off that we purchased in this year. And the county does do a reimbursement to offset the cost for our EMS services. Public services, we're showing about 7% down, so just lower operating costs, some reduced beach maintenance in the budget, which is partially offset by some of the rises that we have in there for streets. And in library, we're up about 11%. We're seeing some higher materials and programming costs in the library right now. And we do have an offset from the Pinellas Public Library Cooperative, so they do provide some revenue for the library to operate for us. Resident services, which is formerly Parks and Recreation, is now aquatics and recreation. So aquatics hadn't previously been broken out prior to fiscal year 26. We did break that out into the budget. And so with that, this is just showing kind of more of the true cost to run that family aquatic center year round, and then some of our signature events with concerts in the park and the 4th of July, the boat parade, and then our holiday decorations as well. And then non-departmental, this captures our areas where we're having any of our FEMA expenses. So this had captured any of those. This also has any interfund transfers. So if that was to resiliency or fleet or wastewater or capital, reclaim resiliency, you can see that that is not factored in for this year. Jumping to our enterprise funds. So you can see here that we're showing 56% change, and that's really has to do with where we're at with our capital projects. And so with that, what we'll be looking at for this year is any increases as we're looking at from the rate study. But again, that capital figure is going to change just based on all the work that Camden's doing. So as we get closer to our September timeline, we'll have a really good factor of what we expect. Not a very big change with our reclaimed fund this year. It's essentially flat, just a modest increase for those lateral service pipe replacements and system maintenance. Stormwater. So we have some of the capital outlay for fiscal year 26 with the drainage and resiliency projects. Also, we have some of that debt services is declining in that fund. In our parking fund, this was a big increase. So the driver is really that we're transferring funding to the general fund as well as our capital fund. So because we increased those parking fees, we're anticipating having anywhere from $1 to $2 million additional revenue. So we're utilizing that to put back into the general fund or projects that are streets in nature or any options that we have there as well. Okay, so with that, I just need some feedback from you all on our current operating budget. 7 minutes, that's a new high score.
Wow, okay, I can start. I'm going to start from what I consider the essentials and work back. I guess I'm like, is the message, I mean, wastewater is down 13 million year on year, but yet we have 40 million in capital improvement projects, and we just talked, maybe I'm just not tracking on that. And so that one is kind of surprising to me, and then I think stormwater, same with being down a couple million. It seems odd. I'm not sure, is this about reappropriation of projects one year to the next, and that's why this is about new money, or, yeah, because I would certainly hope we have more than $3 million worth of stormwater projects going on. And
yeah, so that's where on this particular one, on the capital, that's why I keep stressing the importance of try not to fixate too much.
This is just the operational cost then, or?
That's operating and capital, but it doesn't include any of those projects that are going to have that reappropriation. So
what is the total amount that's being reappropriated that's outside? So maybe I'm not tracking with that. Do you all understand that? And I'm just being nice.
I'm following with you, and I don't think I'm tracking with it.
Okay. Could you step us through that a little bit, what that means?
Sure. So I have to pull up what the total capital appropriation is. The biggest piece that we were just trying to get feedback on from today, because those enterprise funds are together, if you will, with operating and capital, I have them presented as together, but we were just looking for any feedback on the operating. When we bring this back to you all again, you'll see Camden and I will go through and do another true up of what we're expecting for reappropriations.
This number is operating only then. Is that correct or no?
It's operating and capital. Yes, but it doesn't have it doesn't have all the reappropriated projects in it.
Okay, so we're saying like with wastewater, and I'll just pick on that one because of wow, we know we have a big mountain to climb. We're saying in 2027, all in, we're going to be at 10.43 million for 2027 versus last year was about 24. correct?
Yes, but
Okay.
again, that number will shift based on any projects that Camden needs to reappropriate that he's working on this year
Okay.
into that
So
27.
what you're saying is the 10.4 million doesn't include any reappropriation from the 23.9 million of
Right.
2026?
Right.
Which means it's gonna go up.
Okay, so the 10.43 million is net new investment. And if we push anything that doesn't get executed in 2026 into 2027, it's just moving money.
Correct.
Do you know, then, if we are looking at equivalent net new money, I'm just curious, how would that compare year over year, right? So like, net new money to work in 2026 versus reappropriated from 2025. So just to look at these numbers, more apples to apples, that's what I was trying to understand right now. So, I now kind of get it. Do you, like, what, no? Okay.
I get
mean,
it.
I get what the numbers are now, but if we're not looking at apples to apples, I think, is why I've got the head scratch of like, is this right? Because it doesn't seem to send the message that I think we're all in on addressing wastewater and stormwater and reclaimed, like I would have thought this might have shown, so.
Those projects have to be moved. Reappropriated.
Yes.
Yeah, and to net it out of 2026 is to see kind of year on year, how much net new money are we really putting to work versus just projects are delayed or whatnot, right?
Well, and some of the projects,
Or take-
they're going to straddle fiscal years.
Sure.
Right? It's like some of those large pump projects are straddling multiple fiscal years.
Right.
So with that, when we're trying to estimate, we could say, you know, if you think, let's talk about Fire Station 22, for example. We know that that whole project is going to be about $9.5 million. But in a given fiscal year, Camden and his team is only going to get done $6.8 million. And so with that, we're not saying that we're going to put that entire budget into there.
Right.
So it's going over a certain number of fiscal years. So the intent of today was not to talk about capital, it was just to get any feedback on some of our operating
I
assumptions.
understand. I think we're trying to just look at it apples to apples a little bit better.
And
so
I think
that-
today we can't.
Okay, sounds,
That's fair.
sounds fine. Okay. Then let me just, a couple more things and then pass the baton. Resident services.
Yes.
So that one has a request for an incremental amount of $400,000 year on year, right? About 1.6 to 2.04 resident services. And we talked about the fees last time and getting some of those maybe squared up a little differently. So I guess I'm looking at the aquatics program growth drives the increase. So this is a cost. What I don't know is how is it offset with fees, so that if we're looking at this and say, gosh, $400,000, we could put that to work in a gazillion different ways. I mean, I love our aquatics programs, but is it going to generate $400,000 of revenue by doing these programs? Or is it just sunk costs in, to a community value? And the whole community is like, yes, we want $400,000 of our taxpayer dollars to go to aquatics. So I don't know if there's any other way to look at that, but that was sort of jumping off the page on that one for me.
Okay.
Yeah,
On that,
yeah,
the recent fee structure that you all did,
yeah, last time.
was the $400,000 increase in operating costs considered when the fee structure was looked at?
Yeah, I think
I don't know.
we were not, I don't know that I walked out of that session exactly
I don't know.
clear.
Devin, do you know if that was the case?
So what we would give you guys at the next meeting would show all the revenues for each one of these different areas. So resident services, for example, so that would have pool admissions, any staff-led pool programs, so you can see what that cost recovery is.
That'd
And
be
so we'll have that information for you too. This is our very high rolled up figure, and like I said, I mean, without having our property casualty, our workers' comp, those are pretty large contracts every year,
Sure.
right? I mean, I have them flat, but those are going to be factors that are really going to impact this budget process as well.
In the enterprise funds, I've learned over the past few days that an enterprise fund means it's run like a profit and loss for business.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, okay, I can get that, right? And in the context of breaking even and not carrying a deficit, shouldn't we look at the $500,000 or so increase in operating costs for the pool in connection with the analysis for what we charge to use the pool?
Yeah, and it might be that if Mandy were here, you know, you
Yeah.
channel your inner Mandy, but I mean, just to say like, well, this was actually where we were at pre-hurricane levels, and we've been down without, you know, I
Yeah.
don't know.
I don't know.
So, but that would be helpful to put in context, because I feel like $400,000 is a lot, and it'd be great to know that there's, what the kind of community value benefit, and therefore, like, yes, we want our
Right.
tax dollars to just subsidize it, or, well, we'd like some better cost recovery strategies for it, right? Yeah, okay. That would be helpful. And, I mean, I guess the thing too with like the library, for me, I just looked at that and I thought, well, $70,000 for materials and programming costs. I guess I would ask, like, what's the impact if we held it flat? You know, what's the impact of that? Or, and I mean, law enforcement, it's another $250,000 increase. Like, if we held it flat, are we down an officer? Like, what's the impact? It would be nice to just understand what that looks like a little bit.
And we might make that recommendation.
And I don't, because I don't know what the impact is. I certainly want us to all feel safe and secure here and having the right, level of support. And I think some of the modest shifts with code enforcement and stuff you could probably point to, they've been a revenue benefit and a safety benefit to our community by having some of these ordinance officers out there. So paying $40K more feels like fair if we're getting the value. But so that's those are my notes.
To your point, the CFO for the state made a bill that we have to do a 10% budget reduction exercise. So in our next meeting too, we have to present that. We have to share that out when we do our preliminary budget.
We have to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So Francis our city manager had each department go through, and we're going to meet on that and look at what those options are. But I did want to just kind of share that note that it is a bill that we now have to comply with. So
Okay.
each year.
Okay.
10% each year.
That's a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, it is. 10% each year. Forever?
Unless the bill gets amended.
I have a few things. I'll be brief. This is operating cost stuff. Is that what? There's no resiliency fund in the floods?
No, this is going to be personnel, professional, contractual, any materials and supplies or repair and maintenance, things of that nature. That's what's factored in for our operating.
I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around all the funds and how they work together. And what I came up with that I'd like to just toss out here with the group is, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but I'll just pass it around. It's like a bubble flow chart with circles.
Are they all the same?
And the bigger the circle, the bigger the budget or the fund.
Sorry.
That would help me. And I think it would help a lot of people understand how all of our operating funds and enterprise funds and water funds and funds for this and funds for that all kind of relate to each other. The parking fund is a really big fund, and it's great because it pulls in money, and the outflows are probably pretty low, and there's a lot of arrows coming off the parking fund circle that go to other circles.
Yeah.
So is it possible, you think you and staff could do something like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
May I keep this?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Yeah, certainly. We could have that as part of our next
Okay.
meeting. Any way that we can make this more consumable to the
Thank you.
average person is always a goal.
Sure. That's all I had for the operating costs. I've got some general comments before we adjourn.
I think it it's hard to make a decision one way or the other, given that it's incomplete.
Right.
But directionally, to Kathy's point, if we can answer some of those basic questions.
Sure.
Next time.
Yep.
You had some comments?
Yeah, I don't, how much time do we have? I don't know the process here, so do we have another meeting or two before we do a final budget?
Yes, yeah, I could send out the calendar that we have to
Okay.
you. That would be helpful.
I think our next meeting is the 15th.
Good. Okay.
I don't think so, right?
July 21st is the next.
July 21st?
21st.
Yeah. Because the commission meeting is the 14th. And
Okay.
their workshop.
And then if I could just get this out for the minutes, just some random thoughts of my first meeting with you guys, so I want to put it out there. You all have spent a lot of time and effort on looking at, where we spend money and how much. After the budget's established, I would like to see us spend time on where we can save money and how much. And we'd like to see that on a future agenda for further discussion.
10% will be part of it.
There you go. That's great. Yeah, perfect. Perfect. And as part of the proposed, possible solution for that, I've seen this city government spend a lot of money on studies and analysis. I suspect some of that's mandated. I suspect some of that we could we could do ourselves. I mean, you did a home run presentation on what we just looked at. So could we assemble a report on what we spent in the past, present, and future on analysis? Because there's a lot. I think there's a couple of studies that are underway at $300,000 each. That's the budget for the library.
The
So-
index.
What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just, just a thought there. Also, the improvements to the systems and the assets, as those become more and more improved, our maintenance costs should decrease. I'd like for us to look at what that looks like as we get to, a functional, like 90% solution steady state, and how that impacts ongoing regular repair and maintenance costs. And if we're better off maybe bringing on personnel to handle run-of-the-day standard stuff as opposed to service contract agreements with a third party. Should we internalize some of this maintenance repair stuff, or is it better, what's the cost benefit for internalizing versus contracting? That would be one thing to look at. I mentioned the bubble charts. I agree the resiliency fund for me is confusing and it's too vague. I can't get my head wrapped around that. Like I can the reclaimed water fund. That's pretty simple, right? Can we, we just marked the end of the first half. But before our next meeting, can we get a first half balance sheet for where the city is?
I think
You think that's possible?
fiscal. Aren't we fiscal?
Or somebody's fiscal. So we got the same, so we're at a third of the way, 3/4 of the way through, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So can we get a balance sheet for the first 3/4 of the fiscal by our next meeting?
We could. The other thing I was going to offer is we could send out the annual comprehensive financial report to this group, which is our ending for 25, which is our beginning for our budgeting purposes.
It might be a bad time to be asking for that with the budget and everything else going on.
I mean, I'm happy to, we just finished it, so I'm happy to share it with this
Okay.
group. We're going to post it on our website.
Yeah.
And so if you all would like to read that, if you have trouble sleeping at night.
So the balance sheet, what did you call it?
The annual comprehensive financial report. It's our audited financials from our auditors.
Okay. Yeah, good timing on that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, we finished it June 30th.
In watching the meetings from earlier in the year, there was some discussion about the payouts from the county for the bed tax collected revenues. And could we get a bigger slice of the pie of that? And there's a new program underway that I think Francis is taking advantage of, going to participate in. I think, could we add that to consideration for an agenda item to discuss for what can we do as a city and what can we do collectively as municipalities within the county to try to create a more equitable distribution of that revenue that we really generate and the rest of the county benefits from. So that's, we at a high level, I think that would be something worthy of us to look at. And then finally, the last meeting, there was a gentleman that did a presentation on the pricing for beach permits for cabanas. And apparently it's per year or per cabana or per hour of sunshine. I don't know. But there was some wiggle room in there that we might want to look at to see, if I've got 3 cabanas, I'm getting a permit, and I've got 300 cabanas, I'm getting a permit.
They each pay $10 a year.
Okay, yeah,
Right.
so that's,
Does that exist?
yeah. So.
I think we were supposed to follow up on that.
Yeah, I can reconnect with Mandy, our resident services director, and find out.
Thank you, guys. That's all I have.
Anything else?
That's all I've got. I think I've got all the feedback, so thank you.
I think that was
Thank you.
a big one. Big day.
We are dismissed.